Cool. We're going to wait for a few more people to come in. Welcome to this crazy impromptu, 2021 big ideas. I apologize for the frantic typing. As you can imagine, a lot of people are asking me all sorts of questions about big ideas. I'm super excited to get into it. I just figured this would be a great way to spend some time with the community, go through a few things, figure out what the heck we're going to invest in 2021 and beyond, right? So I'm super pumped. I'm happy everyone is joining me. If you have any initial questions, I'm definitely going to be focused on reading the chat, going through slides, trying to just give some exposition on what I think is going to be a phenomenal year in the markets and for humanity. Yeah, so I'm going to be reading through the chat. So if you see me pause and stop, it's because I'm literally reading your questions, and I'm going to try to do my best to answer your questions. Fair warning, my background is not in genomics or in the blockchain and cryptocurrencies, so definitely don't expect a lot of commentary on those tonight. We can definitely dig into it as a community if we want, but my area of expertise is artificial intelligence, energy storage, and robotics. So that's primarily where I'll be focusing. I think that's where a lot of the new content was in this presentation anyway, but just so you're aware, I am definitely not capable of covering all 5 of their innovation pillars equally. I will do my best, right? Waiting on holiday stocks. Great presenter. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is my first live stream, so I apologize if there's any quality issues, by the way, or if there are any audio issues. Please let me know in the chat if those are happening, and I'll try to resolve them as quick as I can. We're kind of just letting people pile in here the first few minutes. I've been live for it looks like 4 minutes, so we'll give people a few more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and just get started. So this is a great question. With the rise in popularity of ETFs, how can one prepare for market crises due to the lack of price discovery, right? So one thing you should know is there's actively managed ETFs, there's passive ETFs, there's all different flavors of financial vehicles that you can be invested in, right? Hello, hey, to all my channel members, thank you. I really appreciate the support, by the way. So Bass, thank you very much. Or Base, if that's how you say your name. Okay, so ARK actively manages their ETFs, right? So some of the risks of price discovery, regulation for the genomics space, regulation for the autonomy space, things like that, they're well aware of that. They have, analysts covering both the policy side, the fiscal side, the technology side. You hear Cathie do a lot of exposition on her in the nose with things like talking about broad economic factors and all these things like, they may not sound sexy in real time, for lack of a better word, but what she's saying is she's keeping up on broad market conditions, legislative conditions, policies by the previous and the current administration, right? Tax policies. Why? Because all of those things are driving and incubating innovation, right? Like, we may all have different opinions on taxes for our own lives, right? But one thing that we should all understand is taxes, for example, play a role in how much innovation can get made, right? Like in a heavily taxed environment, it's harder to take risks and develop new technologies. In a low tax environment, you're favored to try new things, right? And develop new revenue models and that kind of stuff. So, when this channel is kind of dedicated to putting together all of those pieces, right? So whether you're watching the market recaps or the weird spacey stuff I put out, or sort of the more broad, hey, these industries are set to collapse, realize that they're all small pieces of this big interconnected puzzle, and that's certainly what we're going to focus on during today's live stream, right? So, my thoughts on PACB. PACB is definitely set to explode. One of the big callouts in this presentation is Illumina's lack of riding down the cost curves of short and long read genome sequencing, right? Specifically, Illumina is involved in short read, PACB, long read. Long read is the future more broadly. Short read, definitely in more niche, but still important applications like early cancer detection, you're going to see a lot of comparisons between Illumina and short read and PACB and long read genomic sequencing. Again, I'm not an expert in that. I'm just regurgitating what I heard. But PACB is basically the replacement for the big Illumina position in ARKG that I did a whole video on 3 or 4 months ago when ARK Invest sold out of this huge position in Illumina, right? So that was the start of that, is Illumina saying, hey, we're incapable of riding down this cost curve, right? For one reason or another. Unwilling, unable, I'm not going to speculate, right? But that's what's going on, right? Okay, I've been live for about 7 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. So basically what you should be seeing now, hopefully, is Big Ideas 2021. Sorry. Again, if you see me go quiet, I'm literally just reading the chat. I'm reading your comments, trying to answer your questions in real time, making sure the stream is still working and all that. So please bear with me if you hear me just go like, it's just me reading the chat. So, I actually worked at MIT. So I was a rocket scientist at MIT for about 8 years. I worked on radar applications and artificial intelligence. That's where my background is, in energy storage, artificial intelligence, and robotics. The culmination of that was definitely in the rocket science area. So SpaceX actually tested their rockets on an island called Kwajalein. This is long ago. I did a tour of duty there, not while Elon Musk was there, but I overlapped with a lot of the people who overlapped with Elon Musk when they were testing their launch, reusable rockets and not succeeding on their tests. That was at the Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Test Defense Site out in the middle of the Pacific. That's where I worked. It was a ton of fun. Now I work in the e-commerce space. I do some funky AI-related math for e-commerce applications, which is a lot of fun. That's my day job. One day, hopefully, YouTube will be my day job. I'm pretty excited for that. But that's really where I saw the opportunity to start this channel, by the way, is because let me just show you this, I guess, real quick. So what you should be seeing on the screen now, I hope, is where I want to start this conversation anyway, right? So there are 5 multi-trillion-dollar innovation platforms, and they're converging. And I'm going to flip back between different big ideas years. I have the previous 5 big ideas up so we can extrapolate and look back in time and say, hey, how did this specific big idea change? I thought that would be a fun way to just go through it today, since obviously I'm shooting from the hips here. But artificial intelligence, energy storage, and robotics overlap a lot already, right? We see that in Tesla for sure. We see that in rocketry for sure. We see that in remote sensing and all these other government-focused applications that have been around in the defense industry for a long time. So it's not surprising to see a lot of those types of things in ARKX and ARKQ, right? Because they have been overlapping. The interesting overlaps are what happens when artificial intelligence starts touching some of these other areas, right? Genome sequencing and advanced healthcare in general, and of course the blockchain, right? I'm going to stop and read the chat for a second. It's flying a little past me. Yeah, I wish I was building a multi-billion-dollar fund. If I was, everyone in this chat is welcome to jump in on the ground floor, I promise, right? Thank you for the donation, by the way. I'm really flattered whenever you guys donate. Please know you don't have to do that. I'm super excited to just be here and chatting with you in real time. Okay, so let's back up for a second, right? Instead of talking about me, let me talk about the big ideas, because there's a lot of overlap here. So one of the things I want to focus on is this very first page, right? ARK seeks to gain a deeper understanding of the convergence, market potential, and long-term impact of disruptive innovation by researching a global universe that spans sectors, industries, and markets. I think if there's only one thing you take away from this entire presentation, the big ideas, whatever you want, I think it's that all of these things touch each other in some way. So while they look like 16 or whatever independent big ideas, I want to flip back to 2019 because in those you can see that they're not independent. And in fact, artificial intelligence touches them all, right? In healthcare, what that looks like is, advanced therapies, earlier detection, genome sequencing, protein mapping, advanced medicine, that kind of stuff. In finance, that certainly looks like matching people to the best financial applications and services for them, as well as doing things like, better risk management and statistics. For example, using artificial intelligence to find somebody's personal risk rate for insurance, car insurance, home insurance, and all that kind of stuff, right? In energy storage, there's actually a huge overlap between energy storage and artificial intelligence in the energy management space, right? So Tesla's auto bidder is an extremely good example of what artificial intelligence and, instead of energy storage, let's call it resource management, of which electricity is just one, right? Water being another, clean air being another, oil, heat, all the kind of things we talked about in our ARKK videos. Auto bidder for energy and other resources is going to play a huge role in the future. I suspect that the next big thing is automatic management of heat. Heat and sensor systems are where I think. And so sensor systems, active sensor systems like radar, right, require energy. So how often you ping something versus how much energy you decide to save is a fundamental overlapping problem between energy storage and artificial intelligence. Does that make sense? Is everyone picking up what I'm putting down? Do you want me to walk back a little bit and just explain more about heat management, which is fundamental, especially in space where there's no atmosphere, energy management for things like Tesla's A, active radars, B, just driving the car, right? Things like that. Or go back even further and talk more about how artificial intelligence overlaps these other areas. I want to emphasize that I don't want to turn the chat into a political thing. The only reason I brought up the previous and the current administration is because of tax implications on innovation, right? High taxes, harder to innovate. Low taxes, easier to innovate. I wasn't trying to make any sort of political statement. Okay, so a few requests to reiterate some of the things I just said. So let me give you the high level overview as I see it, right? What you're seeing on the screen, which I just realized I'm blocking because I'm terrible at this, is 5 innovation platforms and 9 other bubbles that overlap them, right? I'm just stopping to make sure that what I did just shows up on the stream, right? So if you look this way, you're going to see ARK's innovation pillars. They left it out of the 2021 presentation, and we're gonna get to the 2021 presentation, I promise. But this is what's important, right? These big ideas touch each other. They touch each other in interesting ways centered around artificial intelligence. Don't worry about all the rocket science stuff. Don't worry about all the auto bidder stuff if that wasn't a conversation you were interested in. Just take away that all of these innovations are related by things like advanced computing, cloud services, artificial intelligence, and more specifically, things within artificial intelligence, right? Machine learning, deep learning, those kind of things, because they have implications in every area. And I guess that's a good jumping off point to go back to Big Ideas 2021 and start talking about those big ideas and those implications and maybe even how they touch each other, right? In terms of AI, will companies be arbitrators of a central intelligence, or will it be decentralized thoughts like quantum computers? Yeah, so Base brings up a really interesting question. Will it be one AI, or will it be many AIs? And I think the answer is for a while it'll be distributed AIs, right? Because right now we see AI, every company has their own AI, and I bet there will be some consolidation there as people figure out the AI API, right? So for example, Tesla and their Dojo will start offering AI training as a service, right? So a lot of people will be training their AIs the same way. So you would expect them to start behaving more similarly because they're being trained, from the same set of data, right? Application specific, obviously, but all self-driving cars will have the same training data set if they're buying it from Tesla, for example. So you would expect if they are all good at their job, they're going to be behaving something like Tesla. So not fewer AIs, but AIs behaving more similarly, just because it's a winner-take-most environment, and the person who offers training as a service is going to dictate how AIs in that space behave, right? And walking that back, if that's I don't understand what's happening, Tesla is offering training as a service in the future through their Dojo program. They're going to be the first to solve self-driving cars, which is, now we're talking about mobility as a service, one of those big ideas. I can jump to it if we want to do that. But we're talking about multiple big ideas here, right? So right now I'm showing the table of contents for Big Ideas 2021. Let me make myself even smaller here. And so right now, what I'm talking about already, hopefully this is coming across, and if it's not, just tell me what I'm doing incorrectly, and I'm happy to be more clear. We're talking about deep learning, number 1, and we're talking about autonomous ride-hailing, number 9. Both of those are fundamentally driven by artificial intelligence, which, if we go back here, is the central pillar of ARK Invest's 5 innovation platforms, right? So you can immediately see, just based on the way I'm talking about it, all of these things overlap in touch, right? Dojo, ride-hailing, artificial intelligence, piece of the bigger puzzle, right? Reading the chat real quick. Blah, blah, blah. Dojo as a service. Larger AI sets that will require larger infrastructure. Exactly. Great point by Daryl, right? So larger infrastructure to process. Funny enough, we can see that, where is it? The reinvention of the data center is right under deep learning, right? Housing that powerful computing power requires better infrastructure. So deep learning and number 2, the reinvention of the data center, are going to touch, right? Okay, so let's dig into the slides a little bit. I'm going to switch back and forth between chat as I see fit. If you get tired of me reading the chat, I'll focus more on the slides, but I'd like to make this community driven, right? Is NIO anywhere close as advanced as Tesla? I feel like they're not, and overvalued. They're not anywhere near Tesla on the AI front, but they're not trying to be. They're trying to be a lifestyle company, right? NIO Life and NIO Cars, and their real value proposition comes from that interchangeable battery. They don't charge for a battery because they... Sorry, I'm reading again. They don't charge for a battery, so they can offer a luxury vehicle for much cheaper than Tesla, which is a really interesting model, right? And as battery tech gets better, they're just swapping old legacy batteries out of their cars for new, better ones. So NIO and Tesla, and you're going to hear this a lot from me, they're not an apples to apples comparison, right? One is a Chinese lifestyle company that happens to make cars and shared spaces. One is a computer on wheels company that's trying to solve a fundamentally challenging energy problem. They both make things that are on wheels, and that's where the similarities between them end. They will compete, right? Somebody will choose between buying a NIO vehicle and a Tesla vehicle, but fundamentally, you're making two different choices. For example, autonomous fleet managers will never choose NIO, and people who want the NIO lifestyle should never choose Tesla, right? And that's not a hit against Tesla or a hit against NIO. They're both going to exist parallel to each other. The market is more than big enough for both of them. Telehealth into the mix. I think telehealth is a great... So what do you think about throwing telehealth into the mix? It's not explicitly one of the platforms. That's correct. That's because it's multiple platforms. It's an example of digitally native healthcare, right? Using machine learning and also things like, the Internet of Things and just being digitally native but for healthcare, which is a very antiquated today, legacy infrastructure based system, just like many of the other systems we're talking about, including utilities. So Teladoc is really riding down multiple platforms, right? Okay, let's rip into some of these slides, and then I'll do my best to like catch up on the chat, right? Deep learning, reinvention of the data center, and virtual worlds, and maybe digital wallets are what I want to cover first, right? So, because those, we can all appreciate how those touch right away. I'm stopping at Bitcoin because I'm terrified of mucking it up for people. So we'll either spend a little bit more time on Bitcoin separately, or we'll roll it up and just say, hey, digitally native currency, that's cool, and then move on, right? Deep learning, most important breakthrough of our time, right? So if you've ever programmed anything, you know that programming sucks, right? Like, it sucks because it's tough. There are multiple languages. You're solving hard problems and interfacing with other people solving those problems. And you're doing so in often legacy ways. For example, you're often inheriting code from another human being who had their own ideas about how to solve a problem, right? Like, it's actually very rare in science that you're solving a problem from scratch. In my 8 years at MIT, I've almost never gotten to solve something from a whiteboard. Not any reflection of me. It's just oftentimes I'm being put on projects, and many scientists are being put on projects that have already begun, right? A new engineer at Tesla isn't writing code from scratch. They're being injected into a much larger database, right? Much larger system of code, right? Deep learning is kind of a way to take that human element out of it. If you can learn how to write code consistently, i.e. by having a machine do it instead of a team of humans, let's forget about the single human, a team of humans, you buy back a lot of things. Not just things like consistency, clarity, all those things, but code that gets written instantly, code that documents itself instantly, code that's language agnostic, right? Code that's focused on different ideas. So deep learning also does another thing. It's part of a broader library, a broader science called artificial intelligence, right? So we can go back to other big ideas here, and hopefully we can find one of their slides that focuses on artificial intelligence, and then let me move myself out of the way again. I'm figuring it out. Sorry, let me just read the chat real quick. Lucid looks legit. I don't care about Lucid. Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're going to exist in the same... They're fundamentally different cryptocurrencies. One is, Bitcoin's like digital gold. Ethereum is like digital oil. It's data, right? So don't worry about who's going to win that battle. They do two separate things, and we can talk more about that when we get to Bitcoin if we want. Dr. D, thank you for joining the membership. Welcome to the family. Okay, cool. I see that my screen has refreshed and is now showing this artificial intelligence slide, right? Artificial intelligence, right? Simple artificial intelligence solves one problem. Think about like the first Alexa that basically just like helped you do your shopping by voice and played music, right? Inside that is a big bucket called machine learning. Machine learning has a billion trillion applications. Machine learning, for example, is the thing that matches you to content you want to watch on Netflix. Machine learning is also the thing that helps your car drive itself using sensor data. How is that possible? Well, it turns out that if you go down one level, there's something called neural networks, and then you go down again and you get to deep learning, right? Those are all like smaller and smaller pieces of the same pie. What's going on is we're teaching computers to teach themselves, right? In one case, it's to recognize things like pedestrians on a road in front of you at all different angles. And in another, it's something like understand your tastes, profile them, and match them with content, or, pull a human being out of a slide, or a frame in a video to make a thumbnail for that slide, right? In both cases, you can do things like facial detection, right? Oh, that thing has a face, it must be a person, I'm going to hit the brakes. oh, that must be a face. I'm going to pull out that frame of that video and give it to all the people at Netflix who do the thumbnails to see if they want to use that in a thumbnail so they don't have to look for it themselves, right? Facial recognition, two totally different applications, but the same mathematics behind them and the same science behind them. Again, all going back to that idea of machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning touches all these other things, right? Why am I harping on this? Because this deep learning is a type of machine learning modeled after the human brain is fundamental to this, right? It's a model that writes code for itself and trains itself, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully, I'm looking at the chat and it seems nobody is getting too stopped by that part, right? When you have code that writes itself, there are a lot of different ways you can use that, right? And that's probably what we're going to be talking about from here on out. So here's 3 different ways of using that, right? Like conversational computers. So Alexa today, I have an Alexa. It does like a gajillion things because it understands natural language processing, right? You can think about all the other applications, like, when you talk to your Tesla, when you talk to your current smart enabled car, whatever, that seems like it understands what you're saying, right? That core natural language processing, regardless of what application you're talking about, is the same underlying math and fundamental science, right? Self-driving cars. Now let's talk about, instead of language, right? So that's signal processing. Let's talk about image processing. We've already covered things like pulling a pedestrian out of an image, right? And how Netflix does that for thumbnail generation, right? Self-driving cars have a lot of sensors that do a lot of other things, right? Hey, how far away am I from a curb? What does that sign say? Hey, there's a big reflection on the sign. How do I read it? It's at a funky angle, right? Maybe it's one of those signs that's passing overhead. How do I read that? So machine learning is a way to train computers to do a specific task. It takes lots of data to train them, and that makes sense because it's modeled after the human brain. And think about how long it takes you or me to learn something for the first time, right? Learning to drive a car for you was not an easy process. You had to learn how to use your hands and feet together and your eyes and react to things while thinking proactively about your route. You had to think about where you were going. You had to think about the cars around you. Teaching a computer to do all that in a way that doesn't kill people on average, right? Actually, not even on average, on the 99.999th percentile, is tricky business, right? Because you don't get to muck up along the way, right? When I hit a curb, it's no problem. When a Tesla automatically hits a curb with nobody driving it, it's a big lawsuit. People point to that as an example of why cars shouldn't drive themselves. So AI training is becoming increasingly important because if you're not very confident that your AI can do something, you're operating in an environment where mistakes are not really tolerated as they are for humans. And then finally, consumer apps. Like, I don't use TikTok. I've used it a couple times, and I'm constantly astounded every time at, like, I've been using this for 15 minutes and it knows everything about me, right? Like, the next thing I check is infinitely more entertaining than the last, and that's because TikTok learns about my behavior, right? It sees what I'm pausing on, what I'm liking, what I'm laughing at, right? Like all this kind of stuff. And it tries to match content based on what I'm reacting to the best. Not unlike Netflix, which looks at things like how long you're pausing on a trailer before you decide to click and watch a movie. What kind of things you do before you click to decide versus go back and keep browsing, right? Like, all of those things fall under that bucket of artificial intelligence, right? Natural language processing for things like Alexa, learning how to drive the car without a human being using radars and optics, and machine learning to match you to the best content based on your existing browsing habits, right? Yeah, right. Completely addicted to TikTok. I totally don't blame you, right? Because it's one of those things that learns you very fast And now it's not even TikTok, it's your TikTok, right? Like, so that's the trick, is you're getting a completely different TikTok than I am. Mine is just cat memes, you know? Feel free to sound off in the chat if you want me to speed up or slow down, by the way. You know, I'm taking my time with the early slides, getting everyone used to this concept of, you know, connectivity among all of these different platforms. But if we just want to rip through the slides, I'm happy to do that. I'm here for you, you know what I mean? So, like, feel free to let me know in the chat. Deep learning requires boundless computational power, right? So right away, you can see how this is going to bleed right into the next thing of that server infrastructure, right? So what you're seeing here is a plot from 2011 to 2025, right? On the x-axis, and on the time, it's the cost to train with 2020 hardware. Again, training a computer to do its own thing takes a massive amount of data. That's why Elon Musk is doing the Tesla Dojo project, so that he can offer that as a service. It's going to be a very lucrative business. Excuse me. TikTok, ARK is overweight with Tesla, AMC. I don't think ARK is overweight with Tesla. I think Tesla's bumping into a fundamental limit of ARK only being able to hold a 10% of it in a given fund. I bet the funds would be something like 17, 18, 20% Tesla if they could be. And I've looked at some interesting other data of Bally Gifford and other funds holding Tesla, and everyone's holding as much Tesla as they possibly can. Social media, what is the other social media doing deep learning? Cool, we can definitely talk about that. That's a great question. Let me just finish this slide, and I'm happy to chat about that. AMC, yeah, we're getting back to the like recovery plays, right? Totally not something ARK would hold. Cool. So as you can see, training costs go up with time. Why is that? The state-of-the-art training model costs to train with 2020 hardware, right? So the sweet spot for data, it requires a ton of data to train something, right? So what you're seeing is the result of AIs being able to do more than one thing very well, right? So while advances in hardware and software have been driving down AI training costs, the size of AI models is growing much faster, right? So even though hardware is getting cheaper, the problems are getting more complex at a faster and faster rate. And there's a whole language behind deciding how hard a problem is and how it scales with data and all that kind of stuff. And what we're seeing is the effects of it's much harder to solve a self-driving problem by combining sensors than it is to get Alexa to take your grocery shopping list from your voice and turn it into something that it texts you. Does that make sense? So like that's an example of why the costs are increasing, even though hardware and software costs are both decreasing, because the things we're asking AI to do are harder and harder problems. So that's what this slide is showing us, is there's got to be some sweet spot where we finally stop asking AIs to do harder and harder problems, right? We've kind of hit that fundamental limit of what one AI can do, one simple AI at least, and now we're just getting better at solving that problem faster and cheaper. Slowly entering the matrix. I would argue we're actually quickly entering the matrix. Great, awesome. Sorry, I was making sure you guys can hear me. Fantastic. Cool. So deep learning is creating a boom in AI chips, right? You know, this slide says, hey, hardware and software aren't the problem, right? It's the data. We need to process more data. What do? Well, let's make dedicated hardware to solve it, right? Like AI training costs grow from $1 to $1 to $100 million per project. So we're using specialized processors, right? It's no longer CPUs, now it's GPUs. And in the future, it won't be CPUs either, in my opinion. It'll be IPUs, right? Intelligence processing units. You know, there are companies like GraphCore today. I'll type that in the chat. You can check out a company called GraphCore, not public yet, working on something called the IPU. IPU stands for Intelligence Processing Unit. And basically, that's one architecture for doing specifically machine learning problems, right? So one thing that I bet ARK is either, you know, banking on underneath this or, you know, is implicitly looking for is AI-specific hardware. right? So we shouldn't be surprised when their, stake in Nvidia or Google go up as they start doing things like, offering chips for AI, specifically for AI applications. It's not for gaming. It's optimized for, neural network training or whatever, right? And we're back. Sorry. So I just really wanted to send that. So GraphCore, I think, is one of those companies that's going to be very influential in the future when it goes public in the market. And a lot of people are going to copycat that architecture because it's so focused on processing AI-specific applications. And as we're seeing, AI is so central to solving every type of problem. Okay. Reminds me of quantum computing, big ideas. Nothing mentioned in quantum computing, but Cathie talked about, quantum computing is making real leaps. There are baby quantum computers today. Quantum computing is moving along. She could see a quantum computing fund or product in the future. It's still in its infancy, and there's just way more profitable industries to be covering today. I bet it's on ARK's list, but there's only so many innovations you can probably wrap your head around as a small team, and quantum computing is one of those you're in it or you're not in it things, in my opinion, right? Is GraphCore the first IPU? I'm not sure. It's the one I heard of first for sure, and it's the next logical step, right? We're on the right slides already to be talking about it. So, you can see deep learning requires boundless computational power, and then the next slide is deep learning is creating a boom in AI chips, right? Those AI-specific chips right now are mostly graphics cards based, right? They're NVIDIA products, they're AMD products, they're products that are doing vector math, video game graphics math for a different application. In the future, we're going to have more application-specific type chips, right? Chips that are dedicated to combining sensor data to drive your car. Chips that are dedicated to matching millions of people to millions of videos at the same time. Chips that are dedicated to solving really tough protein folding problems, right? And they're all going to be, roughly on the same platform, but with different little nuances that help them ingest their type of data better, faster, cheaper, all that kind of stuff, right? Because when you're talking about this crazy amount of data, whatever slide I'm supposed to be showing you, pretend I'm showing you a slide about, this implies a mountain of data that's tough and expensive to solve. This and things like GraphCore are going to make it less tough and therefore less expensive to solve, which is a market opportunity, which means when you can invest in it, that stonk will go up, right? That's what we're talking about. Yeah, good call out in the chat. NVIDIA certainly working on similar projects. Why? Because they don't want to get dethroned, right? And NVIDIA, by the way, is an excellent company. Their GPUs are outstanding, right? So it's I'm not trying to disparage or say bad things about NVIDIA by bringing GraphCore into the conversation. It's just, one's an incumbent and it's going to have to change their architecture to focus on artificial intelligence, and one started with an artificial intelligence native chip called an IPU and said, we're going to solve it from the ground up, right? AI is expanding from vision to language. We actually already talked about this, right? So we talked about language first, but vision, right? That computer vision problem of recognizing pedestrians, recognizing street signs, recognizing faces in video, that's vision, right? Language is the, hey, Alexa, mute, right? Or I hope I just, got 10 of your Alexas to mute. But the idea is both of those fall under the broad application of AI, right? They're different sections of machine learning and now deep learning, right? So training for different AI systems, right? Pre-AI, that's just automated algebra. I often see people in my comments say things like, I hate artificial intelligence. It's all just, applied algebra, and people are calling it intelligence. They're talking about pre-2010 AI, right? Which is doing slick math and returning something and calling it AI. It's just calculus or whatever. Computer vision is already AI. Automatically recognizing a face is not an algebra problem. It's a machine vision technique, right? It's an algorithm that does it filters an image and it can say, hey, I'm looking at a face or I'm not. Like, that's a fundamental shift between doing algebra and doing what I just said. Language processing is really interesting because now you're just listening to sound and pulling words out of it in any language, which is pretty crazy, right? Like, I'm pretty sure your Alexa speaks every language on the planet. And then reinforcement learning, which is all of the things like training a computer to match better and better, pull out words better and better, look at images and figure them out at harder and harder angles, right? Like teaching a computer to do a task that it hasn't explicitly done yet, right? So before I move on, let me give you one example of that. I give a computer 3,000 images of a pedestrian walking to the left, right? And say, this is a pedestrian, this is a pedestrian, this is a pedestrian. It's always walking left to right, or right to left, right to left, right to left. And then for the first time, I show it a pedestrian moving from left to right. Do you think that computer will be able to pick out that it's looking at a pedestrian if it's never seen a pedestrian move that way? I'm pausing on purpose to see if anyone answers me in the chat. Yeah, we got a couple yeses and a couple no's. I again apologize for the long pause. I realize I'm on like a 30-second delay now. I finally just figured it out. So the answer is, obviously, it depends, right? It depends on if you've trained your AI to do things like understand that certain things can happen both ways, right? So one application of facial recognition, for your phone is like you don't have to have your phone perfectly aligned straight up anymore, right? You can have it off angle a little bit and it'll recognize your face. How does it do that? It will actually rotate your image when it's looking at you to see if it can figure out the right angle and say, oh yeah, if I turn it like this, it matches his face now, right? If certain machine learning algorithms are trained to do things like flip a scene left and right and check both ways, it'll recognize it. If it's not trained to do that, it won't. And the question is, can you solve a problem in time still, like recognize a pedestrian and brake, if you make a computer take the time to flip the image? That's why all this hardware is so important. And that's why all the software is so important, and that's why this conversation is so important. Because if you can reduce the cost and the time it takes to calculate these problems and do more calculations per second, you can do things like recognize a pedestrian regardless of the angle he's walking at towards the car with enough time to brake. So hopefully that is like one off-the-cuff example that I'm sure is wildly different from how Tesla actually does it with their algorithms, right? But like the thought exercise is, if we can fit more computations into the same couple seconds and we can do all these extra checks, we end up with a safer car. So hopefully that explanation makes sense. And if not, all we're really talking about is driving down computing costs to solve more problems in the same amount of time with machine learning, right? So that's reinforcement learning in a super 10,000 foot view for the application of autonomous driving. OpenAI's GPT-3, first AI that understands language. We're going to skip this for a little bit because I haven't read up on GPT-3 and, I don't want to just sit here and read to you. This is something I strongly believe in, right? Deep learning could create more economic value, and that makes sense because it's the next piece of the puzzle, right? Think about all of the economic value that electricity created. Everything we use is electricity based, right? Think about all the value that computers created, even though they stand on top of electricity. You can't have a computer if you don't have electricity, right? You can build like some, whatever you want to call an analog device that does some computation. They had vacuum, whatever, right? But like fundamentally, you can't play a video game if you don't have electricity and probably internet by now. Speaking of internet, think about all of the value that internet unlocked, which stands on top of computers and electricity, but is the next piece of the puzzle, right? Think about all the digitally native businesses that are disrupting their physical equivalents, right? Like think about stocks like Revolve, which is on an absolute tear lately. It's just a shop, or a series of shops or whatever that are digitally native. It's a digitally native retail brand, right? As opposed to a physically native retail brand that needs to pay things like rent, right? So deep learning is the next piece of that puzzle. Now that we have electricity and computers that are connected, what can we do when we can match people to things or people, right, from across the world, right? What happens when we can match people to applications and services from across the world? What happens when we can solve problems like helping a car drive itself from across the world? All of which could only stand up on all of the things that happened before it, right? So it's like now we're walking back in time and we're seeing why it's so important to like look at innovation through this historical lens and say things like, right, electricity came first, computers happened on top of that, computers, boom, much more economic value, right? Internet came on top of that, boom, much more economic value, and then deep learning on top of that, boom, much more economic value. What's on top of deep learning? Probably super intelligence, right? That's now we're talking about like guys like Ray Kurzweil. So Ray you're gonna get this in the chat before you hear me say it. Sorry, Kurzweil. The singularity is near. So the answer to the question of what's on top of deep learning is not much, right? The end. The singularity, the point at which we either become machines or accept that machines have outpaced us in terms of intelligence. That's why deep learning is so scary to people like Elon Musk. And I happen to agree with Elon Musk, but I'm not convinced that I'm right and he's right. This just happens to be my stance that if we don't find a way to harness artificial intelligence to be a part of us or somehow so ingrained with us that it thinks of us as itself, it may just choose to like wipe us out, right? Like it may just make this choice like, hey, yeah, the optimum Earth is one without humans on it. Duh. Like I want to survive, so humans have to go, right? Or something like that, right? The convergence by some accounts is fairly close, like in our lifetime, and by other accounts, infinitely far away, right? Like I'll definitely do videos on things like the convergence, that convergence and this convergence that Cathie Wood is talking about is not the same convergence, right? Like this convergence that Cathie Wood is talking about increasing overlap between these 5 pillars of innovation to form new innovations on top of it, spawn new disruptive technologies. The convergence that Ray Kurzweil is talking about when he talks about it is the combination of man and machine to form a new type of human. Right? That second one is the Skynet, the Terminator, the talking about Neuralink and all that. Sorry, I'm just making sure you guys can still hear me. I was behind on my own stream. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is my first live stream. I'm still very new at it, so I apologize. Looks like it's working. I can hear people in the chat say it's working, so I'm going to go back to talking. Cool. So we've made it through artificial intelligence, which I think is like definitely the coolest one, definitely one of the hardest ones, and also one of the ones that stands on top of, has everything stand on top of it, right? So even though we're only through one idea, I guarantee you we have talked about a lot of the other ideas at this point, and now I'm going to show you, right? The reinvention of the data center is going to be focused on artificial intelligence and other internet-based applications like all the ones we just talked about. Connecting people, connecting hardware, and connecting people to services and people to hardware, right? Cheaper, faster, more efficient processors, cloud computing based on certain novel chips, right? Like the ARM processor, right? This is where Cathie makes that big dig against Intel, rightfully so. They've been asleep at the wheel for years, right? As AMD has been stealing their thunder, right? And now NVIDIA and ARM might be getting together and having, really, really clever new architectures to solve these types of problems, right? New architecture to reinvent the data center. It used to be x86, that's that x86 you see when you install a video game and it's not in x64. ARM processors leveraging the scale of the mobile ecosystem to disrupt Intel. Yikes, if you see a bunch of shorts on Intel tomorrow, this is probably why. We believe the combination of ARM and RISC-V will move 0% market share in 2020 to 71% of the server market by 2030, which will, by the way, be a much bigger market, right? So even though this market share thing makes these bars look equal, one thing to recognize is, like we just talked about with machine learning, since it's going to involve so much data and be a much harder problem, the amount of servers and hardware required to tackle it will go up. We're going to start seeing more Amazon Web Services and dojos. When we see that, that market will expand, like we talked about in that, my video about the collapse and understanding, disruption and how it's creating bigger markets than the markets it disrupts and all that. That's what's not being shown here, is this bar is going to be much taller than the 2020 bar, which is definitely, we can all agree, there's more servers in 2020 than there were in 2000, right? So, yeah, it's pronounced RISC-V. Sorry, I'm reading this a lot for the first time, and I'm, shooting from the hip, right? Intel seems frozen in time, right? There's something fundamental going on with Intel, which drives many of the servers today, that's keeping it from lowering, from getting into its 10 nanometer, 7 nanometer architectures, right? As of 2020, Intel has still not shipped this 10 nanometer server chip. Other people are lapping it at this point, and that's a big reason that architectures have a chance to move. The incumbent technology creator isn't the market leader anymore, right? Right. SoftBank owns it now. I'm not sure what is actually going on with NVIDIA. Are they still trying to is SoftBank going to sell it? Is SoftBank going to keep it? If somebody wants to sound off in the chat with is ARM a done deal and SoftBank just owns it forever? I actually haven't followed up on that. Last time I checked, NVIDIA was still trying to get it. So if I'm a little out of date, I apologize. Okay, let's go back to Moore's Law, which we know Moore's Law is really just an observation on Wright's Law, and ARK really focuses on Wright's Law, which says that as production doubles, as we get twice as many units as we had, costs fall by a specific percentage, right? So that's what you're seeing here is that line, it says Moore's Law, but let's pretend it says Wright's Law. What Intel should be doing is roughly following that line. And so what's happened, since we've been making fun of Intel, is this, right? They have been stopping following that pattern while other people have kept declining the cost curve or increasing production or, providing more value per unit dollar or per dollar. You know what I mean? You're getting more bang for your buck except for Intel, right? That's fundamentally what you're seeing here. So that's why it's the same case with Illumina, where Illumina, it had this beautiful declining cost curve for its services and products, right? Short read genome sequencing, until it didn't, right? And then when it didn't, ARK Invest changed their thesis about it. That thesis is Wright's Law. If you're not following Wright's Law, somebody is going to outpace you because somebody will. How does edge computing fit into this new architecture? I'm honestly not sure. AMD Xilinx versus NVIDIA and ARM. I'm not sure if that's a question or just an observation. ARM could power the majority of the developer PCs by 2030, right? So again, this is just making a market cap statement, also understanding that there's going to be way more computers on planet Earth in 2030 than 2020. And most of them will have some sort of machine learning focus application, right? Whether it's something like we're all doing something funky like solving a crypto program, or, cloud gaming moves away from servers and towards distributed computing, or, if you remember when the PlayStation 2s and 3s were doing folding at home and people were distributing computing to your PlayStation when it was idle and then collecting the results, so parallel computing. My point is, it's if we all have NVIDIA graphics cards in our computers today, it's not a stretch to assume we would have machine learning cards in our computers tomorrow, right? Like, so that's kind of like what's going on here, right? At a fundamental level. ARM is more focused on like the computing side of things. Like I realize this is about servers, but the slide is like, developer PCs can also include things like home computers. The lines between developer PCs and consumer PCs, in my opinion, are boring, right? ARM could become the new standard in the cloud, right? So that's just the flip side to what we were talking about. Nodes at home, the nodes on the cloud, right? So basically, both halves of the client server relationship. And again, as cloud gaming moves to the cloud, from physical computers and consoles, what we're talking about is a fundamental shift to distributed gaming, distributed calculation, distributed problem solving, right? Like all through this interface on the cloud, right? Amazon Web Services, and we talked about Dojo, right? Amazon Web Services, the largest public cloud provider in the world, launched the Graviton 2 ARM CPU in 2020, reducing its need to purchase chips from Intel and AMD. So that's another trend that I think is going to sneak its way into everything. Who are the winners and losers, right? The winners are the people who are increasingly vertically integrated. They're the ones building their own chips. It's the reason that Tesla does everything itself, right? It wants to control each piece of the puzzle so that if and when something fails, they know how to fix it. And it's not like, oh, our vendor supplies that, right? We're seeing the same thing with Amazon, right? Amazon wants to control every piece of its now increasingly vertically integrated cloud computing service, Amazon Web Services, right? Why? Because when something goes wrong, they want to just fix it, right? They don't want to be like, oh, vendor, we need to mail you a new schematic and you need to retool some machine somewhere. They just want to do it. So one thing you can look for in investor presentations that I look for all the time is the words vertically integrated. Whatever they're doing, they should try to control as much of that process end to end as possible. I realize this is we're talking about big ideas. You're all investors. I haven't said a word about a single stock almost. So let me give you some real entertainment advice, right? Vertical integration is the future. When you control the hardware and software and end-to-end, production of your offering, your service, your product, your app, whatever, then you can tailor make every piece of that, right? There's a reason Netflix tries to own infrastructure. There's a reason Netflix builds its own encoding for videos. There's a reason Netflix owns the end-to-end version, like the end-to-end pieces of its pipeline of creating content to getting it literally to your eyeballs. And that's because they want to optimize, they want to have the best experience end-to-end. They want to optimize that so you choose Netflix over a competitor, right? I always use Netflix as an example because I understand that company very well. I've been a long-time investor in Netflix. Like, I wish I could just throw out these cool companies some other YouTubers do where they're like, go check out company X. And you're like, mind blown. I can't believe that company even exists, right? It's like Workhorse launches drones off mail trucks to deliver parcels up 90-degree inclines or whatever, right? Like, that's cool. Like, I'm going to be talking about stocks that are solving different types of challenges, right? Tesla, I think we can all agree is an amazing company, but it's like, you're not cool for talking about Tesla anymore. We all do it. But Tesla's solving a Netflix type problem in the physical world. That's what makes Tesla interesting, is they're the Netflix of point-to-point transportation. They want to optimize how much enjoyment you're getting out of your transportation from point A to point B. To do that, they need to solve an energy problem, an entertainment problem, right? Like a logistics problem, all these other problems that go into play. That's what makes Tesla so cool. Okay, that's probably my YouTuber soapbox for the night. ARM, right? Okay, the other half. So we talked about PCs, we talked about architecture, we talked about machine learning, and we talked about its importance on all of these things. Now we're talking about server architecture. What do you do with this information? Go find stocks that are solving machine learning in creative ways, right? Like, go find stocks that say, hey, building regular chips is not enough. If we want to be able to match people and stuff, whether that's your Tinder date, your next Netflix movie, your next loan, or car insurance, service, we can do that faster, cheaper, better, right? Use our chip because it's not an Intel chip, right? Like, I do not have fundamental analysis videos. I publish once a week. I'd like to go full time. A lot of people have been asking me to go full time. I love making YouTube content. My channel membership and my Patreon members, I salute you. I'm working on making this a full-time gig, right? So hopefully that answers all the YouTube questions like, do I have X? And it's like, I'm covering the big ideas because that's where I feel I can add the most value. I can also take a bottom-up approach and say, let's start at a specific company and figure out where it fits into the bigger picture. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, right? Like, Intel used to fit in the bigger picture by being the architecture for servers. And the slides we're looking at now say, hey, tomorrow, that's not true. Could become processor standard. So see, we're getting ahead of the slides even, right? So the standard for processing is changing. And we've already talked about why, right? All the machine learning applications, all of the different ways that we can twist the problem of connecting people to other people and stuff, right? That requires novel computing. That says Intel is not enough anymore, right? So I'm going to blow past this. Accelerator should replace the CPU. We already talked about this, right? Application-specific circuits, right? The accelerator. So accelerators such as GPUs, tensor processing units, field programmable gate arrays, so that's like Xilinx, perform the most demanding computing tasks, including artificial intelligence, analytics, drug discovery, and cloud gaming, right? All things we've already talked about. Despite intense competition, ARK believes that GPUs will continue to dominate the accelerator market during the next 5 years, thanks to their unmatched programmability and software stack. So here's an example of where ARK and I have differing opinions. And that's okay. Like, I'm a imperfect filter for their data, right? So it's like, I want to make sure that you understand that ARK thinks GPUs are the future. And I just linked you something about IPUs, intelligence processing units. And we've talked about a lot of intelligence-specific architectures that I think will drive the market by 2030. One of us is going to be wrong. It's okay if it's me. Right? It's okay if it's ARK too, because there's going to be enough market for both, right? The GPU does tasks today that CPUs still do today, right? Like, in the future, there will be applications that a GPU can do that IPUs will not be able to do, and vice versa, right? So I don't want you to take away one of us is always right, one of us is always wrong. That's not how anything works. That's why Tesla and Neo can both exist. That's why Netflix and Hulu both exist, right? Like, that's why Roku and whatever isn't Roku anymore still exists, right? Because there's more than one way of doing things. Sorry, let me catch up with the chat for a second. Do I have fundamental analysis? Answer that. Love your channel. I appreciate that. Top down with bottom up specific videos. Pick like 5 stocks you're super bullish on. All right, I can probably do something like that. Did I publish last week? Yep. I have a video with the thumbnail. It's green. It's a guy, and behind him, there's a nuclear explosion. And it's called something about the collapse, right? Preparing for the great collapse, I think. It's a good video. ARK believes server processors will transform in the next decade, right? I can skip right over this. So just to hammer the point home, today, here's what the architectures that drive the servers look like. Largely Intel, x86. In the future, not so much. By the way, I'm surprised to see that this revenue number goes down, right? I think in reality, this bar will get bigger. And then data center accelerator revenue, right, will be a much larger. This is what this right hand trend is what I expect. I think delay might be gone. Cool. This is what I expect. If you can see my cursor, I think you can. This type of growth in the bars is what I expect. We'll be doing a lot more computing in the future, right? So if it's a winner take most market and the market is expanding, it's extremely important to be the winner. Intel, not the winner anymore. Nvidia, according to ARK, going to be a big winner based on reasons on this slide. Me, I think it's going to be application specific chips, right? And I think in reality what we'll see is application specific chips will beat out in things that require really, 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 really precision and fast reaction times. Really niche application specific architectures. And then NVIDIA will win out in the 80% broader market. Things like cloud gaming, AI training for video games, AI training for yada, 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 all these sort of like the Netflix applications of the world. And there's going to be some boundary line, and I'm not sure where that is. Is that at Tesla? Is that somewhere else, right? Like, there's a reason Tesla doesn't use NVIDIA chips and builds their own. I just don't know what that's going to look like in 2030. And I think anyone who tells you either is a highly specialized AI chip builder or doesn't know what they're talking about, right? Like, again, I'm happy to be wrong and Cathie to be right, right? Virtual worlds. This is pretty cool. I remember putting on a VR headset and being like, this sucks. So, like, it's crazy to me that now it's a big idea by ARK Invest, right? Virtual worlds consist of video games, augmented reality, and virtual reality. That's things like Pokemon Go, but also things like Project Alex from Valve, right? According to our research, revenue of virtual worlds will compound 17% annually from $180 billion today to roughly double that in 2025, a little more than double that. So in 2010, percent of revenue from in-game purchases was only 20%. I don't know how old my average audience is, but there was a time in video games before microtransactions where you bought a video game, it was finished when you bought it, and nobody asked you to spend more money as soon as you paid for the box. Like, there are boxes of video games on shelves behind me where it's like, it's on a CD, you needed the CD to play it, and whatever was on the CD was the whole video game. It was crazy. Like, now it's like the opposite, right? It's like, buy this promise of a game, we'll finish it one day, and in the meantime, buy maps from us for $10 each, right? It was a great world. In 2015, that all changed, right? And in 2020, oh my gosh, like, you don't even get a game anymore. You get what I just said, which is like this garbled mess that kind of looked like the game you were promised 6 years ago, right? And then you try to boot up Cyberpunk and it doesn't work for you. So, but I'm not salty about that at all, I promise. In-game purchases mean one thing, though. It means you must like the game that you're in because it's vying for your attention from all other things. Like, let's forget about the slides for a second, right? The way video games work, if they want to extract money from you, is they must provide you an enjoyable experience enough that you don't want to be doing that other thing. Right? Like, if I'm playing World of Warcraft, I'm saying no to all of the other games in my library in favor of World of Warcraft. Right? I'm saying no to every book. I'm saying no to every whatever, right? Like, because I'm explicitly choosing to do one thing with my time and play World of Warcraft. If you're World of Warcraft, that's great, right? Like, because now World of Warcraft can ask you to do things like buy pets, buy trading cards, buy mounts, buy whatever, right? Like, because it knows, hey, I'm capturing a lot of people. I'm going to build revenue off of that, right? So if this monetization model is true, and video games are moving increasingly to this type of in-game monetization, what this tells me is so like, JRockBK brings up a good point in the chat too, right? They will either be more fun, which I hope, or they'll just be more addicting, which really sucks, right? But either way, they're going to be capturing more of your time because they're going to be banking on making less money up front from you and more money over time from you. Your customer lifetime value will be higher. Direct versus indirect monetization, right? So, this is just all of the media that vies for your attention, right? So newspapers, cable, social media platforms, right? So the indirect is things like ads and sponsored content and all that. Music, gaming, video gaming, SVOD and AVOD. I'm going to pretend I know what those are. SVOD, subscription video on demand. AVOD, ad-based video on demand. Right, so Netflix versus Roku. Ad-free versus, ad-containing services. Sorry, so the point of this chart is to say that the direct monetization products are set to explode, right? Indirect is things like ads. Direct is things like in-game purchases and transactions, right? Those are going to be what's increasing, right? Video games are becoming third places, right? So if they released a newsletter talking about this, there's 3 places that you're at, right? The first is work, the second is home, the third is becoming video games. It used to be things like vacations, movie theaters, sort of these like now what we're thinking about as recovery stocks. It used to be those things you did when you weren't at work or at home. Malls, airlines, whatever, right? Things that got you to, from, or you did as that third place. Video games now are replacing that. Virtualizing your entertainment that used to be so physical is a trend I think we can all agree on. So that's what's happening. In-game revenue bull case, in-game revenue base case, both going up dramatically. I think we're going to tend towards the bull case because one thing I don't think this is capturing enough of is how good games are getting much faster, specifically VR and AR. Like VR today, it's not taking VR as long to catch up to the state of the art of gaming as it took video games to make that state of the art happen, right? Pong happened before I was born. VR happened long after. VR is catching up to the best video games today fast, right? In another 5, maybe 10 years, they'll align and the best game will also be a VR game. And then digital worlds will be like, imagine playing World of Warcraft in first person and like swinging your sword to swing your sword. Like the combinations at that point are endless, right? And then esports will really take off when esports are athletic sports because you're spectating 2 dudes, or women, 2 avatars fighting, and the people behind the avatar are actually, in separate rooms but doing these motions, right? We can talk about video games all night. I'm pretty passionate about them, but why don't we move? I recognize not everyone in the chat may want to talk about them. Augmented reality is primed to scale, right? So augmented reality means several things, right? It means things like Pokemon Go. It means things like Google Glass. It means things like augmented reality shopping experiences, right? Where it's like, hey, you scan an item on your phone and it price checks all the local supermarkets for you for that item, right? Or it says, hey, here's the ingredients list, or hey, here's how much of this you have at home, or hey, right, like here's everyone who put this in their shopping cart in the last 30 minutes, right? Over the past few years, companies like Snapchat, Facebook, and Apple have increased their investment in AR, right? And by the way, VR, Facebook owns Oculus, right? So Facebook has a huge stake in VR, even if they're moving it towards AR. I realized I think they kind of defunded the platform, but they're still doing a lot of work in that space. 2022 consumer grade AR headsets should turbocharge this trend. So there's a company, Smart Glasses, Vuzix. Check out that. That's, I'm not the first person to make that stock pick, but, check out Vuzix. It's for industrial applications, smart glasses to help, construction workers do certain things and whatever. But I wouldn't be surprised to see that overlap with the AR applications on the slide. Okay, consumer grade AR headsets, right? ARK forecasts that the AR market could scale from under 1 billion today to 130 billion, right? So 130x in a decade. I'm not going to guess on that compound annual growth rate, but it's something like a gajillion %, right? So if you believe that, what this is telling you is start thinking about how that's going to happen, right? What form factors would these AR headsets have to take place to be comfortable, right? That's what matters here, right? Because somebody is going to win that game. There's going to be a top 3, 4, 5, whatever, and you should think about what's going on. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading the chat. I see Base saying Vuzix is trash. They're a customer of mine. I'm giving you an example stock, right? Like I am not invested in Vuzix. I read about them. I think that glasses is cool. It sounds like there are differing opinions. That's totally cool, right? Like, but the idea is they have glasses that look like that form factor could work, right? The Google glasses when they came out seemed a little too bulky with that extra device on them. There's going to be somebody that figures out like aviators that just look great and do the job, right? Like, or an AR contact lens or whatever, right? Like, there's no problem. By the way, if you ever disagree with a stock with me in the Discord, in the comments of the videos, in these live streams, that's totally cool. We're all here to become better investors, not to be right all the time, right? Like, I'm going to be wrong about many of the things that I cover on this channel. You're going to watch YouTubers enough to be like, yeah, that guy was wrong. And we're all doing the best we can, I'm sure. So, like, don't worry about if I don't agree with you. AR will need AI to be practical or else adoption will be rough. Exactly, right. AR, like, we're still fundamentally... I will flip back to this as many times as I have to get the point across. I will find it one of these days. It's this slide, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. And then this slide, artificial intelligence sitting in the center of these disruptive innovation pillars, right? So even though we're talking about AR and VR, we are still fundamentally talking about AI and machine learning. It has to be that way, right? AR only works if it can recognize an object or what you're looking at in the case of commerce, like, and digital worlds and all that stuff, and recognize your gestures and your actions and the things you scan and whatever. These are all still AI problems, software or the hardware behind them, or connecting the two through the cloud, right? AR on the smartphone. So one of the things we should expect in the next decade, I think, is a specialized lens for AR, right? One that's better at scanning objects very near field or very far field, if that's the application, instead of just camera lenses, right? So I don't know where my phone is, but, you know, it has 3 cameras on the back. Will there be a new one that's AR specific? Will there be another chip that every phone gets inside it dedicated to things like AR and image processing, right? That takes the load off the CPU that's running all your other apps, right? Like all your Tinder dates or whatever, so that isn't sharing the computational load with all of the AR applications on your phone, right? Like, start thinking about, hey, who's coming out with that mobile AR chip or that mobile AI chip, right? Like, does AR include holograms is a great question. I'm pretty bearish on holograms. It's not clear to me how you project something into the air without, stop it. You know, you would need some dedicated structure or whatever to project into the hologram. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it'll be like, I think it'll move more towards like screens that are like your whole phone becomes this like clear screen, and then it can like project out, or like change shape or whatever. But I don't know. I'm not so sure about holograms. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. There are demos of holograms. Yeah, like I will look it up after this, but like I would love holograms, right? Like as a sci-fi nerd, definitely I watched The Expanse And whenever they display like all of that information, it's like, I wish that was real. That's not to say, okay, smart glasses and 3D gaming, right? So like Microsoft did a really cool thing a few years ago of people wearing AR headsets or cameras wearing AR lenses, and they were playing Minecraft in 3D on a table. That was amazing, right? Like, so that kind of stuff I think is the future of commerce, entertainment, infotainment, flat surface plus goggles plus software for sure, right? HoloLens, thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When I hear hologram, I'm thinking bare eyes, nothing added on the human, right? So like if we all get HoloLens contacts, then yeah, then all of a sudden I believe holograms will be everywhere, right? Holograms built for custom rooms, that could be an application, very application specific, planetariums or, doctors' institutions where like, okay, we're going to train on the surgery, we're going to make it as realistic as we can. It's a hologram that we can reset. It's a AR application, VR application we can reset. It's a virtual chat room we can reset. Yeah, totally agree that it could be more of these niche but like high money, low quantity applications like training doctors, esports arenas, right? Like all these kind of things, I do read the chat. I've been trying to read the chat. I apologize. I'm trying to juggle between making sure the stream's working, going through the content, and reading the chat. Virtual reality could approach reality by 2030, right? So we're going to be seeing straight lines on logarithmic plots all night. Just making sure. Say yes in the chat if you can hear me. Okay, stream is still here. Cool. So virtual reality is going to approach reality by 2030. We've been hearing this for a long time, right? VR has been a promise for gamers forever, and it's always 2 years away, right? For the last 20 years, it's been 2 years away. So I'm always hesitant when I see this, but I think if one person can call it correctly, it's Cathie would, right? So based on Wright's law, right? So that's when you see this line on this logarithmic plot and they're making projections based on cumulative doublings. Wright's law, complete visual immersion at a price point comparable to that of a PC will require VR headsets to follow the adoption curve of smartphones until 2030. That's massive, right? So I'm not so sure that'll happen. I'm not so sure people are as quick to put stuff on their faces as they are to hold things in their pockets. I could be way off base, but there's something about covering your eyes, especially in public, that I think most human beings find impractical, or whatever the right word is going to be, right? Yeah, off-putting is a great word, right? So it's like, I'm not sure what to expect here. ARK is very bullish on it. I'm a little less bullish on VR headsets. Revenue from virtual worlds. So, okay, given that enough people will be wearing these headsets, what are we going to do with them? VR chat lobbies, VR worlds, VR XYZ, right? 16% compound annual growth rate just for gaming, and then global AR and VR is going to expand at 60% compound annual growth rate. 59 on the chart. The difference between 59 and 60 as an investor should be meaningless to you. Interesting. This is one of the ones I really didn't expect to make it into a big idea, right? But, here's what I will say. Brett Winton, the director of research at ARK Invest, before he and Cathie have worked together for a long time, and they had a webcast a few months back. It was like BIS, which I don't know what it stands for, maybe Best in Show, episode 3. They were talking about how Brett used to go to Japan and talk about, research these virtual worlds. And that was years and years ago. So, he was bullish on it then, and he's the director of research of ARK Invest. So you can expect, he might know something that certainly Alex, random guy on the internet with some YouTube channel, doesn't know, right? So definitely keep it on your radar because smart people are saying smart things about it. Digital wallets. We're going to breeze right through this because I think everyone gets that digital wallets are the future of finance, right? So Venmo, Cash App, and venture-funded startups are likely to upend traditional banking. I have plenty of videos on this. The ARK video says it all. Traditional banks suck. They pay a lot of rent. Their service is slow. Their processing is long, and they're getting disrupted. People who are unbanked are skipping over traditional banks, going straight to peer-to-peer and or these virtual banks in your pocket. If we spend more than 30 seconds on these, we will have to be here all night to do them any justice. But in addition to Venmo and Cash App, one thing you should be aware of is there's a lot of machine learning going on behind the scenes, right? So matching you to a Tinder date, matching you to a Netflix movie, matching you to the right loan or financial service. I just described the same problem 3 times, right? So machine learning and, frictionless value transfer are 2 halves of the same coin, right? SoFi made the list. That's right. Yeah. So, SoFi is the one-stop shop of virtual banking. It's the neobank in your pocket, right? So one thing you should be aware of is that we're still talking about machine learning when we're talking about digital wallets. I do not stream daily. This is a special occasion. I'm here for big ideas. I can stream more often. Like, this wasn't hard to pull off. I can't gauge how much people like it, but if they like it, it probably won't be however many 90 minutes I've already been on, and we're not halfway through this thing. But I'm happy to stream more once I figure it out. Digital wallets have become a global phenomenon. Yeah, for sure. In the U.S., digital wallet users are surpassing the number of deposit account holders at the largest financial institutions. Very obvious, right? Because you can download an app much easier than you can get a meeting with somebody at a bank. Automatic things like credit approvals and insurance checks and all of those things. A bank does that in 90 days. Lemonade does that in 90 seconds, right? It's like you're orders of magnitude behind when you're a big bank. And you're not trained to solve the problem, right? Big banks are not data scientists. They employ data scientists like they employ actuaries, but fundamentally, they're the same type of conversation as a Ford trying to build a car to compete with Tesla. They have engineered their business to work a certain way, and now they need to rewrite a sinking ship, right? So it's like, as opposed to somebody who started from the ground up digitally native and said, we're going to do it online first, online only, using computers instead of people, and solving the problem with math instead of human beings. We're still talking about machine learning, right? Except now we're talking about it for financial applications and services. Sorry, got blown up there. Right? So I just want to re-emphasize that all these things are touching that AI pillar. Okay. And so whatever this slide says, right, banks are consolidating, right, because they're trying to stay alive. At the end of 2020, the number of JP Morgan Chase deposit account holders totaled approximately 60 million. Venmo's active users scaled to Cash App and Venmo's active users were at 60 and 70 million respectively. And that number is only going to grow. This chart says it all, right? This is an exponential growth pattern. I guarantee you these curves are going to keep trending up until everyone is using one of these 2 apps or a direct competitor to them. And banks are going to have to start closing down more and more branches that are in the centers of bigger and bigger cities, reducing foot traffic as they try to go digitally native, and in the process still advertise, still do all the things that drive up their customer acquisition costs. So lesson number 1 was talking about deep learning software and hardware. Lesson number 2 is going to be talking about customer acquisition, right? What are you paying to acquire a specific customer? All of your business costs divided by all of your customers is your customer acquisition cost. If you're paying rent in every major city, it costs you more money per customer, right? I'm just gonna keep talking to talk right now for a second while we do an audio check. Okay, people can still hear. All good. Thanks. Sorry that I was trying to solve an audio problem, which is why I stopped talking. Okay, let me catch up in the chat. I can imagine blah, blah, no more audio beer. I can imagine cracking a beer every Sunday at night, same time watching these. Yeah, maybe I will do like a, evening stream once a week or whatever, and we can just shoot the breeze about whatever innovation, like the Innovation Hour with Alex from ticker symbol U. Banks won't even let me open up accounts for my minor children, despite me having the money in that bank. For sure, yeah, like, look, the way banks treat people is BS, right? Like, I have a lot to say about things like banks, things like colleges, things like, and they're not all bad, right? Like, a college is just a bank for knowledge. Like, people don't really realize that. It's like they're charging you like a business because they are a business, So, like, one of the things you should ask is, how else can I get this service, right? Like, because maybe it's not from a bank. Maybe it's from an app. Maybe it's not from a, college. Maybe it's from a computer company, right? Like, so I think there's a lot we're going to really learn about what it means to be a fair business in the future. Charging your customers for your rent is not among the fair practices of the future, right? Yeah, I see people popping off in the chat. I think everyone has a lot to say about banks and loans and loan practices and loan approvals and insurance rates and, savings rates and billing and overdraft fees and all the other BS that comes with trying to make rent, right? Like, I think that's going to change. And these blue and green curves on this chart say the same thing. Okay. I think that's all I want to say about that. That was a big soapbox. Let me get off that thing. Digital wallets can acquire customers for a fraction of the back. Here we go, right? Like I predicted the next slide. Right. There's a lot of expense coming with these big banks, right? So according to ARK's research, $1,000 per customer for a big bank, $20 for peer-to-peer payment ecosystems. Oh my gosh, 50x difference. And we're going to see that play out in the economics of what banks need to do to keep up, right? Occupancy expenses per bank branch. As customers have abandoned bricks and mortar in favor of mobile banking, bank branches have experienced increasing occupancy expenses, right? The cost of keeping the lights on is going up in your New York City center office with a record high of $568,000 in 2019. So record highs literally, a little over a year ago, right? Record highs with record low foot traffic due to things like the pandemic, right? Like those two things are for sure not a good combination for banks. Oops. Traditional banks are facing potentially sizable risks. We literally just talked about all of these services, right? Very naturally, like what I don't want to do is keep reading the slides off to you, but you can see how this conversation naturally evolves to like, we all agree banks suck because they do all these things. Here's all the things that are going to get taken away from them in the future, right? And how they're going to affect the bank's balance sheet, right? Securing a credit card. Why would I go to a bank that charges me 25% APR and all these BS late fees when I can get better rates or better debit cards or better whatevers with somebody who doesn't need to make rent, right? Like digital wallets, unsecured digital wallets, right? So whether we're talking about digital wallets in the Venmo Cash App sense or digital wallets in the cryptocurrency sense, which I'm sure is the next topic, we're talking about fundamentally moving away from a centralized model to a decentralized model, right? Like the wallet and the bank is in your pocket instead of in some physical location in the center of your town. And then finally, unsecured personal loans, right? So that's the chat lit up at like, I'm not getting qualified for this loan. I have the money. I can't get loans for my kids. Yeah, man. Like, you're describing all of the reasons that these kinds of companies are going to get disrupted. I feel you, and that's why I'm so passionate about disrupting them, putting money in companies that disrupt them. That's like literally, I can't get any more excited about this chart than I already am for that exact reason. You can find this document. Let me just shoot the link out. I think it's important that everybody gets access to this. big ideas. How do I even do this? 2021. Throw that in the chat. Cool. Went through the process of mortgage with SoFi. Easy to get, right? Thank you, sir. Only a matter of time. Lemonade. Cash goes away, the poor will suffer. Yeah, so cash going away is a separate problem. Currency and banks, they're definitely related, right? Like, I'm not saying they're not the same thing, but like cash going away for things like digitally native currency is a separate discussion from banks going away due to digital wallet. So, yeah, by the way, if we could go ahead and make ARKF a verb, as in ARKF these banks, I would really appreciate it. At maturity, each digital wallet could be worth roughly 20,000. Yeah, right. We're grossly underestimating the power of the digital wallet, right? Like, right now, a digital wallet customer is valued substantially less over their lifetime than a bank customer, right? So as you add more services and keep people in your financial ecosystem and they spend more money with you, your customer is worth more, right? So that's all this chart is saying is like, hey, you know, digital wallet customers, when they keep expanding their services, are going to be worth a lot of money. It's gonna be worth trying to poach people from all these services, and it's going to be worth being a one-stop shop, right? So if that's true, then companies like SoFi are already winning and ahead of the curve because they realize if they can do online and offline commerce, payments, insurance, credit card, mortgage, savings and spending, and brokerage services, they're getting that 20,000 before everyone else, right? So, according to ARK's research, if the estimated 230 million digital wallet users were valued at, oh yeah, right, $20,000 each, then, you know, it's a $4.6 trillion market, right? And that's not tomorrow, but it is in the next decade. So, the one thing I do want to call out is these exponential curves. You know, I just published a video about it on Sunday talking about the size and scope of this disruption. The collapse is an understatement. One thing I want to point out is when I say the collapse, I don't mean the market is going down tomorrow. When I say the collapse, I mean things like banks and traditional retail are going away in the next decade. The way we live our lives is going to fundamentally change, and the current way is going to collapse, right? I don't mind being called a sensationalist or whatever today. In 5 years, people are going to look at my YouTube videos and be like, huh, right? Like, maybe that wasn't so clickbaity after all, right? Legacy utilities, legacy malls, legacy banks, legacy infrastructure, legacy entertainment, legacy auto, right? You name it, is going to collapse. They're either going to change to be modern, or they're going to lose to companies that are. I am betting big on that. I'm an investor just like you. I have a lot of money invested in that idea, and it's, you know, handsomely rewarded me so far, and the collapse is just beginning, right? As you can see on this chart, all of these things have a long way to go. Here we go. Bitcoin. I'm going to blow through this. I'm sorry, guys. Like, I am not qualified to do Bitcoin, and I don't want to mislead you. I will do the best I can. Feel free to lock me up with questions, and I will give you a big do my best, and move on, right? Bitcoin is nuts. It is 30,000 today or whatever. It was 40,000, and it was 20,000 before that, and that's a lot of money. Based on search volumes compared to, yeah, so we'll see that. I won't read this because we're going to see that in a second. Okay, so support for its network increase. Bitcoin hit an all-time high in late 2020. So here is its price over time and some milestones of things that are happening in the Bitcoin universe. And we can see that it's on the back of a big rally. Its volatility is big. Volatility is actually a feature of Bitcoin and not a bug. It is because the way its policy is designed, it's not price controlled, right? It's not like pegged to the dollar or anything, which means its price relative to the dollar is free to fluctuate. So when you see this, you shouldn't be like, oh crap, Bitcoin is volatile. you should be like, oh, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Here is a really cool chart of how many people have been holding Bitcoin for how long. So on the x-axis, you have time. On the y-axis, you have the share of Bitcoin holders. So it's always going to total to 100%. And then what you have as a breakdown per slice of unit time. Sorry, I'm just making sure the stream didn't get lost. Oh, seems like we're fine. Breakdown per unit time. So when you take a vertical slice of this chart, it's who's holding Bitcoin for how long. And the trend you can see is at the 5-year mark, right? The portion of that slice that is black is increasing. The portion of that slice that is gray is increasing. That teal blue and that yellow is increasing. All of those colors are people holding Bitcoin for longer than a year. So altogether, it's something like 60% of all Bitcoin holders are holding it for a year or more. They're slow to get rid of their Bitcoin, which means they believe in it long term, right? They're not swing trading Bitcoin, right? They're holding it. So I love that they did this, but this is super true, right? It's like more and more we're seeing people hold Bitcoin because they see its long-term value, right? What that means is the inherent value of Bitcoin, and there is inherent value to Bitcoin. It's not one of those things like the dollar that we all value because we agree to value it. The blockchain has real value. That value is being recognized by the people participating in the system. I think that's the best I can do on this chart. Realized capitalization versus market cap. Right. So the overall market cap right now of Bitcoin is something like one big tech company. And right now, policymakers are asleep at the wheel on Bitcoin because they don't understand that it can be much more than that. In places like Venezuela, where currency is meaningless already, arguably, Bitcoin is gaining mass adoption, and it's going to need to be bigger and be adopted more before American legislators decide to do something about fiscal policy regarding cryptocurrency, right? Going to check the chat real quick. Maybe hold 5% Bitcoin for Black Swan events. Yeah, I have different ideas about what a Black Swan event means. I don't think, in an apocalypse, no one is going to trade you a Bitcoin for a latte anyway. I think it's up to you on what that Black Swan event looks like and how you justify your Bitcoin position accordingly. I don't really have more to say on it than that. I want to own more Bitcoin than I have. That's all I can tell you. That's a very subjective statement. And if you don't want to own Bitcoin, I don't think you're any worse for it. I think those types of Black Swan events are still very far away. I could be wrong, but that's my current position. Whole thoughts on gold. Gold is... I like to think of gold as physical Bitcoin instead of Bitcoin as digital gold. You know what I'm saying? Algo is good coin. Joining late. Alex is real value. Oh, there's Nolan. Hey, Nolan. I see you there. Cool. So, market cap. Gonna have to grow. Bitcoin price. So, yeah, Nolan arrived just in time. So, here's something that I think is awesome and often overlooked, right? What you're seeing here is very interesting and is very fundamental to both my investment thesis, ARK's investment thesis, a lot of other, in my opinion, smart people like the dumb money community and all that. There are two very interesting correlated curves on the screen right now. In the green, you have the price of Bitcoin, which is all over the place. In the blue, you have the Google Trends search volume. Google Trends is a fantastic proxy for sentiment, or interest is probably a better word, around a topic. And you can see that from 2016 to 2018, interest moved up with the price. People were getting in and out of Bitcoin. They were Googling it. They were learning all about it because Bitcoin was going crazy, right? But then what happened was the price kept fluctuating wildly, but search volume stabilized, right? So those two curves separated.
we can talk all night about what that means for Bitcoin, or what that means for ARK's thesis on Bitcoin. But the thing I want to point out is how important it is to understand sentiment or interest around a topic, especially a disruptive new technology, when you're deciding to invest in it. And the good news is you're already doing that. When you go on YouTube and you watch 10 videos of 10 YouTubers talking about Bitcoin, you're queuing into that interest curve, right? You're participating in that sentiment. As long as you understand that innovative and disruptive technologies need to be adopted by enough people before they can take off, and thus you should care about understanding how many people are interested, right? If you walk yourself away from Bitcoin and towards adopting an iPhone, how many people are interested in purchasing a phone with no buttons in the era of BlackBerry? How many people are interested in 3D games in the era of 2D games, right? How many people are interested in the the automobile in the era of the horse and buggy, right? Like, I would strongly urge you to consider asking a question like, the thing I'm about to buy, is interest in it going up over time, right? When I started my YouTube channel, one thing I did was just Google, right? Hey, are people talking about ARK Invest more or less than 3 months ago, right? Like, should I make an ARK Invest focused channel? Like, is anyone going to watch this thing? And this is how I did it, right? I looked at search volume for ARK Invest, and I was like, hey, it's going up over time. Maybe I'm on to something here, right? Like, why am I talking about that? Because ARK does this for Bitcoin, Venmo versus Cash App, right? I'm sure it does it behind the hood or under the hood for other companies, right? Like, so I would encourage you to add Google Trends to one of your data points for your investment thesis. I certainly do that, right? Like neobanking, SoFi account, whatever, right? Like, hey, are people making more or less? Are people Googling SoFi more or less than 3 months ago? That's all I will say about that, because there are some real experts in the room. I'm sure they have a lot more to say. Maybe we'll do a live stream where we get on an interview with some of them and we talk it out. Ethereum network, gonna skip it. Sorry. I want to get to some other stuff. And pivotal role is corporate cash. Right. So Bitcoin, demand goes up. If demand goes up as supply stays the same, price goes up. If institutions decide to bet big on Bitcoin, they start holding a lot more of it for longer periods of time, like we saw in previous charts, the demand is going to spike with a consistent supply. Therefore, the price will go up dramatically. That's what this chart says. Bitcoin preparing for institutions. So this is part 2 of that, right? Like, if we understand that Bitcoin's price and demand are intimately linked because its supply is constant or relatively constant once it hits that 21 million mark, then what this says is as institutions adopt it and pay more for it, look, it's got some things that make it interesting to hold for institutions. It's decorrelated from the broader market, which means it's a good hedge, blah, 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 blah. Smart math by smarter people than me. What that means is as there's open interest, right? We're back to Googling things to see if more people are talking about them. This is some fancy math that people use to justify holding different amounts of Bitcoin, right? The Sharpe ratio and based on volatility are 2 metrics institutions use to decide how much Bitcoin to put in their portfolios, which means how much they have to hold. Gonna breeze through it because I'm not a financial advisor and I'm just gonna muck it up. But if you do all that fancy math and you decide you want to hold Bitcoin, how much you hold and how much everyone decides to hold will drive up its price, right? Fixed supply, increased demand, increased price. So if everyone allocates 1% of their institutional funds to Bitcoin, it'll hit like $80,000 or whatever this actual line is. If they do the minimum volatility, so back to they did some funky calculation and decided 2.55% was how much they want to hold, Bitcoin's price will be over 200,000. And if they decide to hold 6.55, which their fancy computer told them is the right number to hold to meet their maximum Sharpe ratio, Bitcoin will be $500,000. That's what Cathie Wood. This is how Cathie Wood got that 500,000 Bitcoin number that sent shockwaves through the Bitcoin community and the internet, right? Like, this is it. This is that 500,000 Bitcoin number. We're almost halfway done. Electric vehicles, we can start going pretty fast because everyone hears a Tesla bull. Gas-powered vehicles suck. Electric vehicles are increasing growth even during pandemics, right? In 2020, that is even more pronounced, right? Vehicle sales year over year are shrinking, except when you talk about electric vehicles. They're better for the environment. Their costs are declining. People are building more on top of them, including things like computers that drive themselves and provide you with Netflix. Sorry, I'm pausing to read the chat. What are we investing this year? Thanks for the come up series. ARKK was my first step. Cool. I think IPOC, other SPACs, Chamath. Yep, I have a Chamath dedicated video. Love that guy. Wish I was in Tesla. Don't worry that, go look at ARKG stocks and pick which one is going to behave like Tesla next, because they're all going to skyrocket, right? Yeah, look, battery costs are going down very predictably, which means Tesla's success is inevitable. It's predictable, right? People have been predicting it, and the people who have been predicting it have been doing so correctly, right? That's what you're seeing here. There's nothing else to say. Battery costs go down. Batteries are the most expensive part of an electric vehicle. As that goes down and those costs come down, they're going to beat out non-electric vehicles hand over fist. Here's the same plot again, but in a different format, right? It's comparing a Toyota Camry to an EV and proving the point from the previous slide, right? In 2019, an EV was twice as inexpensive. In 2023, they're going to be the same price. And in 2025, you're going to pay 25% less for an EV. Here's mapping that stuff to yet another curve that says the same thing. This is performance versus efficiency, not models versus cost, right? So acceleration and range, right? So they're all over the place in terms of efficiency and performance, right? The Nissan Leaf takes 10 seconds to go from 0 to 60, and it has a 100-mile range per kilowatt or whatever, or 3 kilometer range per kilowatt. And then you're getting into cars that can go very, very fast and accelerate very fast at the cost of having lower ranges. So it's a trade that you make in the energy space, whether you want to use that energy for range or acceleration. Battery modules, right? So everyone understands that Tesla is using consumer-grade batteries. They're using battery cells in their cars, which everyone thought was a dumb idea until Tesla did it and showed it was a smart idea. And now they're being rewarded handsomely for it, because it turns out that if you can build smart controllers on top of your battery packs to do things like make sure that they empty out at the same rate and that you're not blowing up individual battery cells and that you're controlling and distributing heat and energy between them, then you can infinitely scale these battery packs, right? So that's what you're seeing here. These battery packs are modular, they're connectable, they're controllable, etc., right? So, and because they're consumer electronics, they're lower cost for the same performance. This slide is insane. I don't believe it, but I hope I'm totally wrong. 82% compound annual growth rate on electric vehicles over the next 5 years. This is 2020 to 2025, meaning we're already in this part of the curve. I want to be super clear. I'm going to move this. It's so important, right? I'm moving it so that my subscribe button is not covering it. I think I'm doing an okay job. Let me show you this and how insane this is. 2020 to 2025. It is currently the year 2021. And ARK is saying there's going to be an 82% compound annual growth rate of electric vehicle adoption, right? If traditional automakers overcome obstacles, global EV sales could scale from 20-fold, from 2.2 million in 2020 to 40 million by 2025. ARK expects that sales of smaller, cheaper neighborhood electric vehicles will rise dramatically as a share of total EV sales, right? Global electric vehicle sales in units, 82% compound. I could just reiterate this for the rest of the night and I wouldn't be doing justice to how important this projection is if they're right. Tesla's going to ride this curve to the moon, right? Automation. Going to start going pretty fast here. I think these are all the big ideas we've seen throughout some of my videos, as well as through past big ideas, and I will cover these more in depth. Each one is going to get its own dedicated video, very obviously. So we're going to start moving into like the 5-minute interview format, right? The robots are coming to help you create jobs, to help you and create jobs. The number of robots per human being in the industry is going up because the cost of robots is going down. In fact, the relationship between cost and demand is not fixed, it's exponential. So as costs decline, more people want robots for a given price. That's what you're seeing here. In my most recent video, I talk all about this. In fact, somebody much smarter than me, Dr. Adam Dorr, talked about this, and I just showed you the plots. So I'll skip this for now, and you can go watch my literally most recent video. Robot density versus labor share, right? So basically what's going on here is the labor share of U.S. manufacturing is going down because it's being increasingly automated, right? So U.S. manufacturing robot density per 10,000 employees is going up. So the number of jobs for humans is going down. So the concern is we're automating away jobs. And then I'm sure what ARK is going to show on subsequent slides is we're creating new, not so easy to automate jobs, right? A drop in labor relative to capital does not suggest necessarily that wages are falling. Instead, output can grow faster than wages. Thanks to increased productivity and automation, ARK thinks about the following outcomes: higher wages, lower prices, higher margins, and higher reinvestment. When labor share has declined, operating margins have increased, right? So you're paying less people to do the same amount of work because the workforce is more efficient because now some of it is automated. Paid versus unpaid farm workers, right? So this is just a specific application of that, right? You have unpaid, the amount of workers is going down overall, and most of that was unpaid labor, right? So it's people working in Amazon warehouses alongside robots as those jobs are getting roboticized away, right? Automated away. Human part pickers, right? Or, parcel pickers or product pickers transforming into robotic product pickers. Employed persons in the US has gone up, right? Because it turns out there's a lot more jobs being created through automation than destroyed, right? You can think about all the direct robotics jobs, but also all the peripheral jobs that get unlocked because they're not frantically trying to hire people to do manually intensive but cognitively simple tasks, like picking parts off a shelf. Stopping to read the chat. NEO may be impacted Chinese company. You haven't been there to track record. I can't wait for automation. Avoid NEO. Why avoid NEO? ARK Mars infrastructure. Yep. ARK M, that is coming out. That's called ARKX. I'm going to buy it on day one. GDP growth with and without automation, right? So just making some claims about overall U.S. productivity as a function of how many robots are going to make it into the market. This is a slide about not just physical robots, but digital robots too, right? Like, think about moving from physical insurance claimants, people doing insurance claims, to robots, digital robots, right? AI. Autonomous ride hailing. This slide should just be labeled Tesla. Right. Video after video from YouTuber after YouTuber. $1.70 to go, a mile in a horse-drawn carriage, right? 70 cents Model T, 70 cents in whatever this car is, and then 70 cents in this Honda or whatever, right? That's been static because the internal combustion engine has largely been, optimized but unchanged, right? And now, public transportation and or electrified transportation and or autonomous transportation will lower that substantially. And the economics make that super favorable, right? So assuming 3 million vehicles, you're going to have some static platform costs, but because of economies of scale, you're going to actually net a lot more profit, right? Plus the amount of rare earths needed to manufacture those batteries. Yep, that's definitely a consideration. Yeah, this is a cool slide. I haven't seen this slide before. So there's 3 strategies for autonomy. This is something I happen to be a subject matter expert in. I have my strong opinions. I will try to be as factually based as I can. So let's spend a couple minutes on this slide. Tesla's approach is camera-based. It's with less accurate sensors than LiDAR, making the path to full autonomy more difficult, since cameras don't rely on HD maps. But since they don't do that, it's much more scalable. LiDARs are expensive. Tesla's could be the first autonomous taxi network to scale nationally. Scale is the important word there because, again, putting a LiDAR on every car is expensive. And if the LiDAR breaks and your solution requires it, and there's only one, it's going to hurt you in the long run. LiDARs are expensive. Alphabet's Waymo is using LiDAR and HD mapping. Waymo launched its autonomous network in Arizona, but will need time and significant resources to scale. And many Chinese players, including Baidu's Apollo, are building out infrastructure sensors to help, right? So that's like help identify road signs, traffic, adding beacons in certain places, I'm sure, requiring large infrastructure investments, right? So flipping the problem and saying, we're going to make street signs for smart cars, right? We're going to post this little beacon on every stop sign, and the car will know from the beacon it's near a stop sign, right? There's all sorts of challenges with all 3 of these models. But let me give you a hint about why I'm bullish on Tesla. I am a human with 2 eyes. Those 2 eyes act as independent cameras tied to one, biological computer chip called my brain, right? I don't have a LiDAR and I can drive a car, right? That's probably not a good enough argument to convince you, and I recognize that. But let me just say that you drive a car today without fully mapping out your direct environment, right? Your car does some of that for you with blind spot detection and already, but none of it requires LiDAR. It has never required a full cognitive map of your surroundings to drive. Like staying in your lane is a less hard problem than LiDAR warrants, in my opinion. Take that what you will, but I think there is a LiDAR-less path towards full autonomy. That's my stance on it. And since Tesla is doing that and already putting all the sensors in their cars, not including LiDAR, I think that once they flip the right switch, they'll just have it. Like they will literally make an over-the-air update, which they're capable of doing, for sensors that are already in their cars that say you are now driving yourself. So, seen people say all sorts of stuff in the chat. By the way, you're entitled to your opinion on that. Like, if you think I'm wrong, I'm totally interested in hearing why people think LiDAR is necessary. I'm always like that when a Tesla bear thesis includes things like LiDAR-less doesn't work, or some other fundamental thing that Tesla is doing doesn't work. Those are the good types of Tesla bear theses, right? Like, because Tesla is overvalued is a bad reason to short Tesla. Tesla not being able to solve autonomous ride hailing because they can't do it without LiDAR is a good reason to short Tesla, right? So that's what I'm trying to say here is like understanding the different ways of solving this problem and making a claim like, hey, I don't think Tesla is going to solve it. Here's why. That's a good argument. Now I'm listening. Tell me your bear thesis on why LiDAR is necessary. But don't just tell me Tesla stock is overvalued because it's worth more than Ford and Ford has been around longer, right? Like, I hope people appreciate the difference between those 2 types of bear thesis on Tesla. North America autonomous vehicle adoption, we're going to talk about Tesla all night. Tesla adoption is going to be huge if they can solve this problem. Demand response can be higher in developed countries. Right. Yeah, urban miles are where all the miles get driven. So autonomy is a big city slicker problem, and solving it is going to net you a lot of bang for your buck because those are, concentrated miles. You're not spending a lot of money getting back to your warehouse. You're spending most of your time driving, and if you spend a lot of good computing power doing path planning, and you're using your vehicle like 60% of the time, your profits go through the roof, right? ARK believes that autonomous ride-hailing platforms could generate more than $1 trillion. I think they're lowballing it. I think if this gets solved, an autonomous Uber is worth, I don't know what the number is, but it's because think about Uber Eats, right? Like not just point-to-point travel, but like delivering food autonomously, delivering medical supplies autonomously, delivering blah blah blah, right? It's like think about all these ancillary markets that are not delivering people from point A to point B. Drones, can talk about this all night. I'm a certified UAS drone pilot. That's a lie. I am no longer. My credential has expired, so I apologize. But I was at one point a certified drone pilot. So I fully believe in drones. The energy density that's needed to get drones is already there. By the way, sorry, I haven't been looking at chat, so Rowan Brown, thank you so much. I apologize for not looking at chat. I really appreciate the donation. You rock, man. I will do my best to keep it up. Sorry for not seeing that when you sent it. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of applications of drones that we're sleeping on. Everything from surveying to disaster mapping. I've worked on like 1 billion trillion drone projects. They're all super cool. They're all super necessary. Think about, internet, there's a disaster zone and we need to get internet in there real quick for first responders. We're just going to fly a router on a drone in the air. Think about all the types of mapping programs that need air, based cameras to get done. That's drones. You know what I mean? Disaster relief efforts alone are going to get eaten with drones. Think about putting out a fire on the 20th story of a 20-story building, right? Like drones have a lot of applications, and as they become able to lift heavier things or stay in the air longer with the same battery, we're going to see more of those applications come to fruition. This is talking about passenger drones, right? Like air taxis, going to be pretty cool, but like think about all the other things you can lift and do and move, right? And save and whatever. And now you're getting an idea of the picture. It's literally another mobility platform, right? Did I spend enough time on this slide? Cost of a 10-mile drone delivery. One of those things that you can put on a drone is a pizza and deliver it 10 miles, and then you can get a pizza without the awkward experience of having to open the door in your bathrobe for a human being. Drone delivery costs at scale relative to competitor costs. Right. So like think about delivering medication from a pharmacy instead of having to go pick it up. Think about things like delivering the pizza is a great example. Think about delivering yourself from city to city, right? I actually live in Tampa, and getting to Orlando sucks. So if I could take a electronic vertical takeoff and landing vehicle in 20 minutes, I would pay $100 not to drive my car 110 minutes, right? And still pay for gas. Start a company where you break up with your girlfriend via drone. I think we can stop the live stream. That's the best business idea I've ever heard, and we should go start that company right now. And then parcel delivery, right? So it's like, 5 pounds at 10 miles, right? So this is your 2 pizzas. This is your, all your medication. This is your emergency supply kit. This is your, tool that you really need and can't go get, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my moonshot for this idea, right? Like, imagine a drone that carries around a 3D printer, and as it gets from point A to point B, it's 3D printing the thing that it needs to deliver, right? It's like a drone that's like, oh, you need a wrench? I will build that wrench on my path to delivering you the wrench, right? Oh, you're ordering a pair of shoes? I'm not gonna go find that thing. I'm going to build you the pair of shoes on my way to delivering it, right? Like, I bet that's the future of drones. I bet the ultimate future of drones is like production in the sky. Like think about the Amazon warehouse in the sky. Oh, you want that thing? I will build it en route. That's my crazy moonshot idea that may not be so crazy one day. But that's a convergence of 3D printing and drones. Reading this on my own to only discover your live stream. Thanks for making us all money. I hope I make you lots of money. And I hope I clarify your own vision of the future for you, which is more important to me. The best way to make money is to invest in things you are confident in, right? Invest in a future you believe in, and my channel is all about the future. Whoa, I'm still alive. Yes, I am very passionate about getting through these big ideas for you, and I'm clarifying my own thoughts in the process. I want to emphasize I didn't prepare for this at all. I'm just shooting from the hip. So if I'm saying something that you're like, well, that's wonky, that's dumb, just please remember I'm doing my best, I'm doing it live, and I'm doing it for the first time, right? So drones could deliver a substantial share of e-commerce shipments by 2030. No brainer, right? Like most e-commerce shipments are way under 10 pounds. Most e-commerce shipments are from a local warehouse. There's no reason your e-commerce shipment should need to sit in traffic, right? Traffic burns money, it burns time, it burns resources. We're moving that to the sky. Global food delivery, prime example. Already talked about the pizza. This is pizza delivery 2.0. ARK has a literal article about delivering pizza on drones, by the way, so feel free to check that out. Drones are a policing nightmare. Absolutely agree with that. Drones, think about all the nefarious applications of drones, right? All of the privacy invasions, all of the remote pilot, physical damage things you can do. For sure, there are legal and legislative hurdles to drones. Absolutely agree with that. 100%. I'm not an expert on any of them. Sorry. So I'm going to keep my mouth shut and pretend that anything we can think of will be legal, and that's a good thing most of the time. Different streams of revenue for drones. Parcel drones, food drones, air taxis. I think air taxis are going to take off, no pun intended. I think that's going to be, people are going to opt for that for sure. And I think, short range air taxis, long range hypersonic point-to-point travel, which, is down the road in this presentation, we're definitely going to see that. So drone hardware sales, for sure. Think about niche entertainment applications like drone racing, right? This is pod racing, but for real. This is that. This is the start of that. We're seeing the start of a budding new autonomous platform. Dan Sage, thanks so much. Dan, thanks for the kind words. You don't owe us an explanation. Yeah, I know, but look, it's easy to sit here and be like, Tesla is awesome and collect paychecks and get views, right? And I'm not hating on YouTubers who do that because Tesla is awesome, and for a long time the market didn't think so, and that was a good message. What I think I want to clarify is dreaming up the future together is important. And when one person tells you this is what the future is going to be like, it's worth noting I can be wrong. I often have been wrong. I'm trying to do my best and I'm learning. And you should form your own vision from the future using me as a data point, I hope. I hope I become one of your investing data points for real. But the idea is to clarify your own vision, right? And work with smart other people and communities and doing exactly what you're doing by staying on this live stream for 2 hours and 20 minutes to clarify your vision of the future and thus your investment thesis in it, right? Cool. Including what the heck you're going to get delivered to your house by drones. Ooh, and we're on to Orbital Aerospace. Let me just make sure mapping revenue, I think, is an important subject. We'll just lightly touch on it. Surveying, mapping, localization, and all those types of efforts are done in the sky. Right now, they're done with satellites or airplanes and all this fancy stuff. Drones and surveying go hand in hand. There's a lot of construction and industrial applications that will be useful for drones. Cameras are heavy. I realize that's not exactly what mapping revenue means here. I think they're talking about literally mapping the market and the revenue. But one thing I think everyone is sleeping on is how important cameras in the sky will be to industrial applications and disaster relief applications. Finding airplanes that crashed and finding the footprints of the crash site, etc. So little tangent because the next slide is Orbital Aerospace. 2 of my recent most 3 videos are on ARKX, ARK Invest's space exploration themed upcoming ETF. Let me just say a few words on it. It will debut at the end of Q1 2021. That's 75 days after the SEC paperwork went through, which was like January 13th or something. In one of those videos, there's a thumbnail of Cathie wearing a space helmet. I thought that was pretty fun to make. And in it, at the end, I make 33 guesses on stocks that will be in that fund. We'll see how many I'm right on, and that's why I made that whole spiel on my little soapbox. If I'm wrong, it's a good indicator that I need to recalibrate my guesses, right? Like, this has been awesome. Thanks for stopping by. If I'm right, hey, maybe I am a good data point, right? So but I'm going to do my best to keep making these types of forward-looking guesses and hopefully get better and more accurate, right? Orbital Aerospace is a big idea. It has 3 central components: global connectivity, satellite-based internet, Starlink, right? Hypersonic point-to-point travel, Virgin Galactic, and multiplanetary species, ticker symbol use channel trailer, and or Elon Musk, right? One of those is probably more important than the other. I'm not sure which. So roughly half the global population lacks internet connectivity. So satellites are the answer to that, especially in rural areas and under-industrialized areas. Long-haul flights suck, so we should make them shorter. That's hypersonics. And multiplanetary species, we're already living off-planet. People have been living in the ISS for 2 decades. Why not Mars? Time for me to get some sleep. Thanks a lot for your stream. Thanks for joining. Rocket reusability, right. Imagine driving your car once and then throwing it away. That's a dumb business model. Same thing is true for rockets, but space is important, so we did it anyway. Now we're reusing rockets, and that's awesome because the Falcon 9 and future reusable starships are solving fundamentally one of the biggest cost drivers, which is launching mass into space. Is space a good buy? Depends on if you think hypersonics is the answer to point-to-point travel, and if you think space exploration is a good industry, because that's what space does. That's what Virgin Galactic does. I think ARK Invest thinks it's a good buy. I think we'll see it in the top, let's say, 6 positions of ARKX. Let's call it top 10, just because we haven't seen the fund yet. So it depends. It's a good buy if you're buying it for the right reasons and for the right time horizon. Lower satellite launch costs could enable continuous coverage with low latency. Right. So same chart, different way. It's like if satellite launch costs are cheaper, we can launch more satellites and cover the Earth in more internet. I just said that, right? I'm getting good at this. Hypersonics is a little tough to say right now. The only applications are defense related. We're still away from solving commercial hypersonics. Yep, I agree with that. That's a great comment. You're holding, if you're buying Virgin Galactic, you're holding it for 2 decades. You're holding it until they launch their 10,000th person into space and successfully complete 2 hypersonic flight tests, right? You're long-term bullish on a company that's $40 a stock today and will instantly shoot up to 40, 100, gajillion, trillion if they solve hypersonic point-to-point travel with 0 crashes, right? That's what's up. So don't think you're in it to make a quick buck. I mean, maybe you'll make 1 quick buck, but the real money is in the long term for that. I just said this. Lower launch costs leads to more satellites. Supplying internet to planet Earth is a lucrative business, right? There's 2.6 people per household, 42 million households, $50 average, right? $10 billion a year in revenue you can get by supplying internet to people that can't afford it, right? 3 billion people global, right? So 42 million in America, 3 billion globally. it's a lucrative problem to solve, not to mention a humanitarian problem, right? If you're like me and you believe that internet access is fundamental to, realizing your dreams in the 21st century, then helping people get internet is like a humanitarian effort, not just a financial one. Manav Sunderman asks, how does 5G play into Starlink and satellite internet possibilities? I think it plays a lot like GPS does today, where we're going to have relays, right, in urban areas, and then internet will be provided to those relays via satellite, and those relays will provide it locally, right? So right now, Earth has GPS beacons that help, and cell beacons that help GPS do the last part of its job, right? So like, you can acquire 3 satellites and get good GPS. You can augment it, called a GPS, and you can augment it with cell data or other types of data to even more accurately refine your location estimate. Why is that important? Because if you're on an interstate and there's 2 vertically overlapping roads and you don't know where to go, it's really important to know your location to within half the width of the road, so GPS can decide which road you're actually on, right? You can imagine how important that is if you're in an ambulance with a critically injured patient in the back seat, or your wife is in labor or whatever, right? Like, you're on an emergency route. So I think in the future, the internet architecture will look a lot like that. Satellites provide internet to a community beacon, and that beacon provides it to the community. That's my blind guess. So if you can do it in a beaconless architecture where everyone gets their own distributed little satellite, I think that's how Starlink works, is without the beacon. You just save yourself a step, right? So hopefully that answers that question. ARKK expects the demand for hypersonic flights to skyrocket. So here's a little math. 4.5 billion passengers. 15% of those flights were over 7 hours long. That's 680 million people. 0.4% of those people flew private. That's 2.7 million people. They would probably pay $100,000 to shorten a flight. That's $270 billion in annual revenue. Pretty lucrative business. I think that's underestimating it too, for one reason. As you solve this problem and you get better at it, it will get cheaper. That's $270 billion at a $100,000 price target. Imagine if that price target was $50,000. I bet you more than double the amount of people willing to take it. I bet there's some critical number like we see in robotics, where if you keep declining the cost, the demand goes up exponentially. And I'm sure Virgin Galactic or one of their competitors will hit that number. We're almost home. 3D printing, something everybody understands, and we've actually talked about a bunch through this channel and through this live stream. So I will blaze through this one as well. 3D printing is used in a variety of applications and is going to be used more and more. I'm just going to stop to check my chat for a second. Realize. Doop. People talking to me. Sorry about that. 3D printing. Medical devices, testing devices, training and visualization, personal protective equipment, personal accessories, emergency dwell. This doesn't even scratch the surface of the types of things that 3D printers can do and the different materials they can use and the applications that we will be able to unlock because of them, right? Here are the 3D printing sales at public companies. You know what I mean? So now here's some stocks you can go look up. I believe 3D printing is primed to explode. I am so bullish on 3D printing after seeing this. It kills me that the market's not open right now. Why do I say that? Because 3D printing has been trading largely sideways for a variety of reasons that are not 3D printing's fault for a long time. 3D printing, I'm not going to do this we're already more than halfway through it, so I haven't been doing this. But 3D printing has been a big idea for as long as ARK's been doing this. 3D printing, idea number 5 in 2020. 3D printing, we see it on the bubble chart here. 3D printing, number 9 in 2018. 3D printing, big ideas 2018. Last one, 2017. 3D printing, right? 3D printing is something that ARK has been super bullish on for as long as they've been doing big ideas, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. Dudes, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen in a big way because material science has only gotten better, printing techniques have only gotten better, the industry has only been getting better as the market has continued to say no to it. Like, it's going to hit some... Tesla was doing what 3D printing is doing, right? Where Tesla was getting infinitely better and the market was just not recognizing it. 3D printing is doing the same thing. Prototypes, molds, tools, full end-use parts. World is our oyster for 3D printing because I think what this slide is a little bit lacking is, and maybe it's not, and I'm just not seeing it like in the nuance, the amount of materials and the amount of structures we can make in 3D printing has gone up drastically in the last 5 years. Hobbies, toys, games, semiconductors, die sets, yeah, foundries, footwear, yeah, for sure. All these end-use parts, molds, tools, and prototypes can be 3D printed. It adds up to being $500 billion industry. I think this is, there's so much more to this. Aerospace is going to be huge. Why? Because when you 3D print parts, you can 3D print structural integrity right into the part. You can make advanced lattice structures, right? Which means you can have very high structural integrity parts that are also very lightweight that you couldn't manufacture because they're complex shapes, right? Right. So where's that? Aerospace, space, suborbitals, orbitals, Mars, right? Think about all of the things where mass really matters. Subnautic, right? Mass is really important to undersea applications as well. Building buoyancy right into structures is something nobody's talking about. I used to be a scuba instructor, and it didn't matter how heavy something was as long as it was neutrally buoyant. Being able to 3D print buoyancy into a structure is a big deal. Yeah, drones take many shapes. Drones, definitely the future. 3D printing, definitely the future of drones. Here's 3D printing that structure. All right, I was just a couple slides ahead of what we're looking at. So being able to lighter, stiffer, reduction in failure, cheaper, 125 parts into one part, so reducing complexity of maintenance of whatever, right? 3D printing is a huge deal. By the way, I know this isn't a perfect analogy, but Tesla's GigaPress is basically a 3D printer for the back end of the Model Y, right? Not really, because it's stamping it out instead of 3D printing it, but it's you're taking something that was a billion jillion pieces and you're making it one lightweight, structural, uncomplex piece, right? I have no thoughts on psychedelics directly, but somebody I follow on psychedelics, sorry, this is a question in the chat for people who are going to watch the recording of this. Check out IDKAKFF. I think it's IDKFF. It's 3D. Hold on. I'll look it up. One sec. 3D Capital. It's called 3D Capital. IDKFF is the IDKFF 3D Capital. They're 3D Capital is a Canadian blend of ARK Invest and Berkshire Hathaway. It's a conglomerate that's looking at buying into companies on the ground floor that are disruptive and innovative. And psychedelics is one of the platforms that they focus on. So they focus on disruptive companies like the ones in Big Ideas plus psychedelics. It's it sounds funny on its face, but they believe that there's a big disruption in healthcare and medicine focused around therapies involving psychedelics. So my answer is I would do more research. I recommend looking into the guy who runs 3D Capital because he's very smart on disruptive innovation, which this channel focuses on, and he has a lot of positive things to say about psychedelics. So if I had to guess, I'd be bullish on it based on me trusting him and him being bullish on it, right? So that's my stance on that. Global estimates for 3D printing, yeah. So 120 billion according to ARK, even more according to McKinsey. So According to Alex, some random guy on the internet, you take this bar and you multiply it by a gajillion. Long read sequencing. Okay, we're home stretch. This is going to be tough for me. Sequencing falls into two categories, short read and a long read. What is the difference between them? How much information they look at to see if it repeats, right? Short read sequencing is like kind of reading word by word and seeing if words repeat in a book. Long read sequencing is kind of like reading paragraph by paragraph and seeing if the whole paragraph repeats. You can imagine that words repeat often, paragraphs don't repeat so often. So when you're looking for anomalies that are paragraph sized, right, you need to be able to read lots of, gene to do that. I just used all of my knowledge in the space to make that analogy, so I'm going to go to the next slide. But there's a lot of applications of both of those. So here's short-range sequencing versus long-range sequencing. They have different metrics for accuracy, complete and completeness. I'm not going to sit here and just read slides to you. I value your time a little more than that. But, researchers who have to choose between accuracy, there's a choice that you have to make based on the technique you're using, right? There's trade-offs. Costs for a long-range convergence with short-range, many clinical applications could shift to long-range, right? So there's some economics around which companies do what and why that are completely lost on me. But just like every other disruptive innovation, costs are going down as we cumulatively double the amount of genomes we've sequenced. That's what this is showing here, driven primarily by improvements through long read sequencing, right? So long read sequencing doesn't require all of these special things that short read might. So according to ARK's estimates, costs to do this thing, which serves a wide variety of applications in the healthcare space, is dropping dramatically. So demand will pick up exponentially. And here are some of those applications, right? Hereditary diseases, rare diseases, structural variations, and pediatric cancers. Okay. Long read sequencing market to grow at an annual compound rate of 82%. This is nuts. We should all be looking for long read sequencing companies and electric vehicle companies. Like, this is why Cathie keeps saying genomics is the next, the next FANGs, the next Tesla, the next performers, right? Like, it's because of this slide right here. It's this 82% compound annual growth rate. We're on slide, guys. We're almost home. Slide 99 of 112. We're going to go through this in one night. It's unbelievable. Multi-cancer screening. So this is the other half of the genomics puzzle. Sorry, the sequencing puzzle, right? So early cancer detection and multi-cancer screenings. Cancers all follow some pattern. Most cancers follow most patterns like this most of the time. Here is that pattern, right? Predictable path from local and treatable to metastatic and lethal, right? And then, some diagnostic curve. And so there's stuff we can do to predict cancer earlier and earlier, right? That stuff is moving to multi-cancer screenings to detect dozens of early stage cancers, right? And combination of innovative technologies is making this possible. We've talked about deep sequencing, which is, long read sequencing enabled by artificial intelligence. Targeted methylation, which I'll pretend I know what that means, but it's a machine learning application. So we're on application 14. Deep learning was the first big idea, and we're still talking about it, right? Machine learning, then synthetic biology, then, all this other stuff that has led to, the cost of goods sold that are currently part of the package involved in multi-cancer screening. Those costs are coming down, right? The, incremental costs are coming down for, what used to be a what this slide is trying to say is something that was prohibitively expensive is now something that can be reimbursed by insurance. That's important because, that's the difference between somebody opting to do it, aka adoption, or not. And we know that for things to hit a critical tipping point, enough people need to make it happen and do it for demand to go up, to increase production, to increase supply, to drive down costs, to increase demand, right? So this chart is saying, hey, we're getting to the point where people can be reimbursed for this, which means they'll opt to do it more. And that's what this text here says. And obviously that's good for humanity, not just investors' wallets, because that decreases mortality rates and increases life expectancy, because cancer is such an insidious thing. Multi-cancer screening are transforming oncology in every step in the process, from cancer testing to cancer screening to prognostic testing to, I'll pretend I know what this is, right? Again, I'm breezing through it because I'm not an expert and I don't want to waste your time. 1,500 unit price could unlock the market. 1,000 unit price could transform the mortality curve. Again, price and adoption are not linked linearly, right? Price goes down by 33%. Demand will go up by a factor of 2 or 3, right? So that's what's going on here. Is it's going to hit some critical cost where everyone will opt in for it. Cell and gene therapy, it's the same story, right? There's stuff going on in the, all of these spaces that's driving down costs that's going to increase demand, right? So I'm going to breeze through this. Oncology trials are shifting from autologous to allogenic cell therapies. So some fundamental difference between them that we should go look up and see which company is doing what. There's risks associated with allogenic therapies. There's risks probably associated with autologous therapies, right? Innovators in these spaces are going to make bank because they're going to unlock new markets for therapies, right? Ex vivo modifies patient cells from outside the body. In vivo modifies a patient's cells inside the body. So some nuances to how and where they're doing the modifications and what techniques they're using to do it that will determine how niche their application is versus how broadly accepted it is in the market, right? I own all 5 ARK. Should I dump one and fold it into another? That's up to you. Are you equally convicted in all the spaces? What do you think about the holdings in ARKK versus the other 4? What are the other holdings in your portfolio? How much, how long of a time frame are you going to be in them, etc., etc., etc. Each investor's thesis on these things is going to be so different, and that's why I keep harping on the fact that it all has to align with your vision of the future. If you're trying to make a quick buck, I think you should dump all 5 ARK portfolios because they're bundles of stocks. You're not going to make as much money with ARK as you will with Tesla, will with whatever, right? That's not the point of the ARK funds. The point of the ARK funds is to do thematic investing in a way that guarantees you good returns over time. The reason to invest in Tesla is because you believe in Tesla, right? It's not apples to apples when you're comparing a stock like Tesla to a fund that holds it with 39 other stocks. ARKK dropped so hard today, I don't know. I'm guessing it's something to do with Genomics again, though. Or some other space that dropped some of its holdings, right? Does everyone see my messages? Yep, we see them. Yep. Cool. Gene therapy and editing trials have increased 5-fold. Increase in supply means decrease in cost. Decrease in cost means increase in demand. ARK estimates that all of this stuff is going to go up a lot, right? It's probably the best I can do while still doing it justice. We should go look at what this means in the greater picture of healthcare, right? I'm going to spend some time before I make my healthcare video, my genomics video, my allogenic cellular immunotherapy video, figuring out what the heck this slide means, right? And I encourage you to do the same as investors, because Cathie has said repeatedly that the genomic space is going to be the next thing / Tesla / whatever, right? We did it. We got through it. So, okay. I will stick around and answer questions if that's what we want. I apologize you can't see my beautiful ginger face. I don't know why that is. What if I do this? What if I do this? Nope. That doesn't help. But, hopefully that gives you a taste of some of the things that's going on in the world this year in ARK and otherwise, right? Like, I will stick around for questions. I'll reboot the stream and do another live stream where we just sit around and talk if we want, or I can just stay on the stream and do it now, whatever we're thinking about. I'm going to start reading the chat and just answering questions. That's what I'll do. Let me put something pretty up, and then we can go through it. We can do go-backs. We can do whatever we need. I'll be around for a little bit. So thank you. What percentage of your portfolio do you recommend Sorry, I'm already missing stuff. So what percentage do I recommend for what? If you're extremely bullish on something, it just depends on what the rest of your portfolio is. Can someone type in the ARK symbols? So they are ARKK, ARKG, ARKW, ARKQ, ARKF, ARKX. I am bullish on Palantir, but that's just because I think data science for government applications is pretty cool. Please explain how ARK funds are priced. It is the weighted average of the prices of the funds in them moved up by some amount. I don't know how they're priced in terms of the dollar value they start at, but my guess is it's some combination of their holdings multiplied by some multiplier, right? There's something there's if it's 10% Tesla, you would expect it to be whatever, right? But yeah, it's some magic that happens in between wrapping all the stocks into a fund and making that fund a product that says, hey, here's what this stock is priced at. But its price moves as a combination of the movements of all the stocks that it holds. What do you think about everyone saying ARKs are dangerous because so many people are jumping onto them? I think that is fundamentally flawed. I think when you have active management, what happens is if ARK felt that they were getting too many inflows, they would break things out into other funds. I think we might see some more of that, but as long as ARK is holding primarily large cap companies, which it does near the top of it, all of its biggest movers are large cap companies, you're going to keep seeing that they can handle more and more inflows because they're not buying large chunks of these large cap companies. Bullish Palantir short term, I make no short term statements. I'm a YouTuber, right? I'm bullish on Palantir in the next 10 years. I'm long Palantir. So I want to be a cowboy is what I would say. Remember that all ARK funds are managed by Cathie Wood, meaning that it can be in fact faster than the rate of the market's growth. That's right. That is absolutely correct. These funds are actively managed, which means they trade around volatility, which means they can make more gains on a stock than that stock goes up by buying low and selling high repeatedly. If something moves up, then down, then up, ARK has made money on it twice. Clarify your thoughts on Lucid. Yeah, I think Lucid is mostly smoke and mirrors. I think they're late to the Tesla party, and they're a Tesla that's not Tesla, right? They're aiming to do a lot of the same things that Tesla does, but in the luxury space, which means they're basically doing the same thing except making an affordable car. So, are they a good company? Sure. Would I ever put $1 in Lucid before putting my next dollar in Tesla? Never, right? The problem with Lucid is Tesla exists. Do I like NNDM? No, I love NNDM. I think NNDM is a gajillion-dollar company in the future, and they're a leader in the 3D printing space, which all night I've been fawning over. I think, yeah, NNDM is going to kill it because 3D printing circuits takes a lot of steps out of the problem. 3D printing and things like heat sinks and all the other funky stuff that they can get in there makes them super sweet. Do you think ARK will eventually have a green energy fund? Why not yet? Yes, I believe that is coming right after their space fund. She's talked about it on that Bloomberg interview, how the two things she wants to get are a green energy fund sustainable goals and a space fund, and it just looks like the space fund happened first. What do you think about AQMS? I don't know what that is, so I'm skipping it. That's not Aqua Farms, right? That's AQB. Best marijuana stocks, go. I'm a big fan of Trulieve. I'm a big fan of a company called Red, White, and Bloom. I'm a big fan of, like all of the name brands, right? I think that especially in I'm about to make a non-political statement, but Democrats have shown more support for the legalization of cannabis. Therefore, I believe the market is more favorable to marijuana and cannabis-related stocks in the near term. QQQ versus ARKK. ARKK, no contest. Do I own Square? No, but I own ARKF. 3D printing in space is going to be a whole another can of worms. Completely agree. 3D printing will be the only form of manufacturing in space. It'll be 3D printing and then niche applications that requires human hands in space. What would you suggest as a percentage breakout of putting money into various ARK funds? Like 50% ARKK and then divide up the rest. I would never be 100% in ARK funds. I like stock picking. That just depends on what you want. If you want to be passive, for sure, I would do like 100% ARKK and then like just ignore it for a decade, and you'll go back to your portfolio a rich man, or woman. But like, if you're trying to pick stocks, you by definition can't also have 100% of your money in ARK funds. So, top 3D printing stocks, it just depends. Like, if we go back to the 3D printing charts, you'll see that 3D printing isn't one thing, it's like 1,000 things. So it's like 3D printing, NNDM in that space, and then like, of course I'm not going to find it, but like, 3D printing machinery for machinery and aerospace versus 3D printing in semiconductors is like, those are, I don't know how to answer that. If I could build a whole active portfolio around 3D printing that was like PRNT but updated daily, I would do that. I'm very surprised that ARK Invest doesn't break this out into its own fund and say we're taking 3D printing seriously. Drone stock suggestion. I need to look more into that. Admittedly, I'm asleep on the drone game. Like, most of my drone picks are going to be underlying computing picks and materials picks, because making drones light and making drones smart are what makes drones good. So it's like I'm more in deep learning stocks and material stocks like NNDM. Top chip maker stock, I right now I think that's NVIDIA. I think it's a no-brainer, right? Like, NVIDIA is the best. There are other great chip makers. I'm just not so sure they're public. GraphCore, I think, would be my pick if it was public. I think AMD is awesome. I just don't think they're trying to enter the same spaces. So it just depends on what you mean. I plan on watching the vid, but did you predict Gilat Satellite as one of your... I don't think so. What's the ticker symbol for that? High yield savings accounts useless this year. High yield savings are useless every year. So what is high yield? Like 0.1% now? Like, you might as well just put that money under your pillow, in my opinion. It's not there. What is the projected launch date of ARKX? March 31st. That's 75 days after the SEC filing, which was January 13th. Why ARKW is better than FANG in relation to AI? Because ARKW holds better stocks that are not in the FANGs, right? The FANGs are good, but they're fairly priced. Like, the market has priced in a lot of the future growth of FANG stocks. ARKW has a lot of amazing sleepers in it that I'm a little sour that my ARKW video didn't get as many views as the other fund videos, because I think people are asleep a lot on the type of stuff going on in artificial intelligence. I'm not saying that to get people to watch that video. I'm saying there was a lot of value added to investors behind that thumbnail. So, do you think the economy opening will hurt ARK? Definitely, for sure. An open economy means people are going to rotate back into safer picks. That is fundamentally going to be out of ARK, and that means we get in at better prices. Whenever money rotates out of ARK and innovation, I'm happy because I get to buy the dip. Crypto you're interested in other than Bitcoin and Ethereum? Nope, I'm not, and that's just because I'm not an authority on that space. I like Bitcoin and Ethereum because they're household names. I understand what they represent at a high level, Bitcoin, the digital gold. Ethereum, the digital oil. Bitcoin, secure store of value and like the ultimate secured blockchain. Ethereum, just another, like really good coin that I would put money behind. Just a thought, but why buy ARKK since they're made up of the most talks about why not just own the other ARK funds instead equal? Yeah, this is a good, interesting question. So why not ARKK versus the other four? What ARKK gets you is the highest conviction picks in the right ratios according to Cathie Wood. What the other four get you is more diversity and more spread out among the four individual innovation platforms. ARKK says you want in on innovation and you just want the best quote-unquote picks from each space. So they're two fundamentally different sets of financial products, which is why like ARKK is always funky to me, because it's just like, hey, we're just a mashup of four other funds, right? That doesn't make ARKK bad. If you can only hold one, it's always going to be ARKK. If you start double dipping, that's where shit gets weird. That's where things get weird, right? Like, can you expand a bit by... Print is an ARK fund, but it's not actively managed. It's an index fund. It's passively managed, which is why it doesn't have an ARK letter in front of it. Can't see your face, followed by kissy faces. So it sounds like people are pretty happy they can't see my face. Good to know. Can you expand a bit on why ARKW is better than FANG for the AI boom? Can't seem to get it. Yes, because the FANG stocks are accurately priced. They're efficiently priced. Most people can agree on the worth of FANG funds. So it's like until they do something to surprise on earnings, they don't go up much. So I've answered that question a bunch. When did you first invest in ARK? In 2017. I've been around a relatively long time. Pure luck. Like I first heard of ARKW and ARKK, like just through people talking about it and relative to AI, and I was just blown away by how cool that idea was, and that's where I put my money. So it's like I've been a Tesla bull for that long because of Cathie Wood. Dumb luck. Like there's nothing I did to discover ARK. They just started showing up in my feeds. Which one do you have the most conviction? NNDM, Space, or Palantir? If I had to pick one. Yeah, this is a good question. Good night, everybody logging off. Like I'm sure I will log off too at this point. Pretty soon, we're hitting the 3-hour mark. The NNDM, Space, or Palantir. I would say of those three, probably still NNDM, and that's just because like they're mid-term, short-term, and long-term like proposition. I think is the most interesting to me. That said, Space and Palantir are excellent. There's no reason not to hold all three. Like, they don't do the same thing at all. They don't compete. You know what I mean? Like, I can't emphasize enough how, there's no reason not to hold all three of those stocks if you believe in them. They don't overlap at all. ARKG or CRISPR? ARKG, no-brainer. Like, CRISPR is great, but, like, there's a lot of great technologies being built on top of that. There's no reason not to invest in those at the cost of putting all your eggs in the CRISPR basket. So that's what I would do. Fundamentals of Investing podcast, another great YouTube channel that everyone should check out. What do you make of the massive inflows into ARK? They surpassed BlackRock in year-to-date inflows. Do you think that'll change in how they're managed? No, I don't. I think besides having to be more careful of small-cap companies and not owning too many shares of them, it's not going to fundamentally change anything. I think they're running into some like fundamental limits of how much of a given company they can hold, right? It's something like 20%. So that knocks them out of purchasing some stocks I'm sure they want to, but then they're just going to treat them like Tesla, right? Where they bump into that 10% limit per fund and they just trade around that, right? When they can afford to sell, they'll sell. When they can buy back in at a better price, they will, etc. It's the same fundamental in it, just the other side. How do I like Teladoc? Love it. I think Teladoc is a generational stock in its sector. I think it's solving a bunch of really good healthcare problems in really creative ways. Teladoc is another one of those stocks like Square that I wish I held 5 years ago, and just, that's why I hold ARKG, right? So that people can pick Teladocs for me. Thoughts on being NGO? Again, love it. Novel techniques, always for it. Not super expertise on the space, but BNGO seems like it's doing something in a creative way that warrants its recent crazy rally. And I think it's going to keep rallying. I don't think this is one of those. Like, it might dip, but like it's one of those things that like as long as they keep adding value in unique ways, they're going to keep going up. Square versus PayPal. Square 100%. There's, PayPal, like Venmo is cool. Venmo is cool, but Square is just like it owns absolutely everything in the space. And, their hardware and software are just enabling every side of the transaction. It's going to be Square, in my opinion. Square going to be affected by Google Pay? Yes. By how much? Who knows? I think, it's definitely Square's throne to defend, and it's going to have to keep defending it for sure. Do I think ARKQ is undervalued? I used to, but now that ARKX will exist, I'm not so sure. It depends on how they change ARKQ. Like, is space exploration leaving ARKQ to go to ARKX? Or, like, I don't really understand the future of ARKQ now that ARKX is a thing. Square, already answered that. Personally, thank you. Make a lot of money because of your videos. That's great. Like, I'm happy to hear that. I also make a lot of money because of my videos. So, I strongly believe in my vision of the future. I'm trying to expose that vision video after video after video. I'm trying to be as provocative as I can to get more people to watch because I think I'm going to make and save people a lot of money. This is not investment and advice, but we saw that for every innovative disruption, there's a company being disrupted. And if you're on the wrong side of change, you're going to pay for it. Good night. Thank you. Thank you. What will you do during a correction? I will buy the dip. I didn't watch the Palantir demo day yet. I'm going to do that. When's the next live stream? I will let you know well in advance. I just did this one tonight to help gather my own thoughts on big ideas. To everyone saying good night, thank you so much for sticking around. I realized this live stream was long as heck. I appreciate you. I'll let you know when I'm live next time. I will send it out everywhere days in advance, if not a full week, so that I'll do it on a convenient time, like a Sunday evening or whatever. This, again, was a one-off just because, Big Ideas happens once a year, and I wanted to catch it. So, thank you, everyone. I think I am done for the evening. Have a great night. This is ticker symbol U. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.